Warcraft, the Tree of Eternity. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 251, The Submission of the Berry People. The sound coming through the shell of Harpus sounded soft and lovely. If an ordinary man heard it, his bones would probably be broken. But this pleasant sound was like a flood and a beast to Harpus. Hormuz bees? I heard that you can produce big and bright pearls. Are they bred from your shells? Hurry up, why are you closing your shell so tightly? Open them for me, the queen. I want to collect some pearls by myself and make a pearl necklace for myself. Hearing this, Harpus felt relieved. Just want some pearls? If that's all. Although the habit of the bees is to exchange pearls for items, it is not impossible to compromise in front of a powerful enemy. In fact, it stands to reason that the bees have always been tougher. Because of the solid shell, the Hormuz bees have no natural enemies. But the keen sense Harpus felt, that the sense of danger brought to him by these sea creatures that he had never seen before, was even higher than that of the sharks. However, because of the tradition that the Hormuz bees have always adhered to, Harpus is still prepared to wait and see. If these strange sea creatures can't open the hard shells of the beehives, then there's no need to be so nervous. Maybe they can even exchange pearls for some delicious sea worms. The other beehives didn't think as much as their chief, but their reactions were the same. No matter what happened outside, they would keep their shells tightly closed and would not open them, even if the sky fell and the earth collapsed. If the sky really fell and the earth collapsed, I'm afraid that after many years, some fossil shells that refused to open would be excavated. After the soft and lovely voice called a few more times, seeing that the beehive still had no reaction, they couldn't help but become a little annoyed. Okay, you dare not obey the orders of this queen. Humph, today I, the queen, must collect pearls by myself. Mugul plunderer, smash these shells for this queen. Harpus was shocked when he heard the order, but then he saw that the most numerous green fish monsters were moving, and he breathed a sigh of relief. With the bone knives in the hands of those fish monsters, they couldn't smash the shells of the beehives at all. Sure enough, the bone knives of the mugger predators mentioned by the masters of pleasant voices only made a clang sound when they chopped on the shells of the Hormuz people, but they could not break the hard shells. However, when more than a dozen bone knives chopped on the shells of Harpus, the power they received frightened Harpus. These sea creatures called mugger predators seemed to be the weakest and most numerous species among these sea creatures, but their strength was no less than that of the medium strength sea creatures in his cognition. So what kind of strength do those sea creatures that seem to be more powerful have? Sure enough, after seeing the weak performance of the mugger predators, the commanders of these sea creatures spoke again. Damn it, these mugger predators can't deal with those uglier sea monsters, but how come they can't even break these shells? It's so weak. Ocean hunters. Forget it, let the Naga thugs go directly. After the commander muttered a few words, two mermaids with huge swords in their hands and sturdy bodies walked forward from the path left by the fish monsters. Several mugger plunderers had received the order and had already carried the two bays to the Naga thugs. The two Naga thugs each chose a bay and stood in front of the shell. Then, they raised the giant swords in their hands high, and their arms, which were thicker than the sharks, suddenly expanded a circle, and then they swung them fiercely at the two poor bays. Bang! Bang! A sound completely different from the previous chopping of the mugger plunderer's bone knife appeared. The sensor Harpus suddenly discovered that the two bays' indestructible shells did not last for a second under the Tussi clan giant swords called Naga thugs, and they broke into several pieces. Fortunately, the solid shell gave the bay soft bodies a buffer, so the two bays in the shells were not directly crushed into meat paste by the giant swords, and they were able to survive. While Harpus and the other bee people were still shocked that the last defense measure of the bee people had been breached, a pleasant voice sounded again. Wow. The bee people in the shell are so beautiful. Oh, it's wrong to treat beautiful women so violently. Naga thugs. What else do you want to do? Put down your weapons. The two Naga thugs put down their giant swords that were raised again to completely kill the two bee people. Harpus, who heard these words, also quickly woke up and reacted. He took the initiative, to open his closed shell, and then his exposed body was pushed by 2 flapping shells to the front of the invading sea people. Powerful sea people who have come from afar. I'm Happus, the chief of the Hormuz Bee people. As the chief of the Bee people, I request to see Her Majesty the Queen. Happus judged that the leader was a sea queen, based on the pleasant voice, so he said so. The sea army, which was alerted by Happus's actions, was quiet for a while, and then separated a road again. I didn't expect that the chief of the Berry people is quite cultured, much better than those rude guys before. This was a whisper. Then, there was a command with pretentious majesty. Ahem. The chief of the Berry people, the queen accepts your request for an audience. Come in through the road that my queen's troops have made way for. Harps quickly passed the path made by the fish monsters and came to the back of the sea tribe troops. I saw a few sturdy Naga thugs carrying a bed made of coral and decorated with pearls, and a figure was sitting on the bed. As soon as he got here, Harps lay on the ground to show respect, but he couldn't help but secretly raised his head and glanced at the figure on the coral bed. And this glance made Harps speechless with surprise, and even the head that was secretly raised to immediately freeze there. The figure on the coral bed, except for the lack of 2 shells, actually looked very similar to the Berry people. A stream of black hair fell from her half-exposed shoulders, and her young and delicate face was no different from the most beautiful Baron. And in her pair of emerald eyes, there was a hint of curiosity, looking at Harps who was looking up at her. Seeing the girl's curious eyes, Harps remembered that she was meeting the queen, and immediately lowered her head in fear, trembling and kneeling on the ground. Then, the soft and lovely voice sounded again, with a hint of playfulness. Uncle, am I so scary that I dare not raise my head? By the way, you Baron look quite similar to me, except that you carry 2 burdens. For this reason, I won't do anything to you. Stand up and talk. Uncle. The girl sitting on the coral bed wrinkled her nose slightly. Hearing these words, Harps stood up bravely, but still looked cautious. There is no way. The situation is stronger than people. The barrier that the Berry people rely on for survival can't form any resistance in front of these sea creatures. Harps must be careful. Although this young queen looks kind, there are still many moody guys in the sea. It is said that the crocodiles in the shallow sea area will pretend to cry when they hunt and eat other sea creatures. Harps thinks it is better to be more respectful, but for the survival of the Berry people, he still has to take the initiative. Gritting his teeth, Harps boldly asked, Your Majesty, I'm Harps, the leader of the Berry people. May I ask if Your Majesty wants the pearls cultivated by our Berry people? The girl on the coral bed was stunned for a moment when she heard Harp's words, and then said to herself, oh, by the way, I want to collect pearls by myself. I almost forgot about it when I saw that these Berry people look very similar to humans. Is it really because I have been staying at home for a long time that I have become a natural fool? Oh, no. After talking to herself for a few words, the girl turned her eyes to Harps again. Ahahaha, uncle, you didn't hear anything, right? That's right, I'm here to collect pearls. I heard that the pearls produced by you Hormuz Bee are the largest, roundest, and brightest. I wonder if you are willing to give them to this queen? To be honest, Haps felt that it was too hard to listen to the queen's words. Sometimes she called herself the queen, sometimes she called herself girl, and sometimes she called herself I. Isn't she split personality? However, although he was complaining in his heart, Haps still had to pretend to be terrified on the surface, because the girl's next sentence scared him. Humph, if you don't want to give it, I will let these Naga thugs smash all your shells and find pearls yourself. Anyway, the shells can't kill the Berry people inside. The girl made a fierce expression, which actually looked particularly cute. Haps was shocked to hear this. Although those Naga thugs only smashed the shells and didn't really kill the Berry people, can the Berry people still be called Berry people without shells? Besides, pearls can't be produced without shells. So Harps quickly expressed his opinion. Dear Queen, please don't mash our shell. The Berry people are willing to present the pearl to Her Majesty the Queen. As he spoke, Harps had already taken out a pearl the size of an adult's fist, which was emitting a faint light from the back of his head, and respectfully handed it to the top of his head with both hands. Then, a mermaid holding a spear and a staff took the pearl offered by Harps and brought it to the girl. Wow. This pearl can be considered a knight shining pearl, right? It seems that these berry people are really the best pearl producing race among the sea tribes. Well, the berry people are not bad looking, so why not recruit them? Listening to the girl's words, Harps had several thoughts in his mind. Chapter 252 Overview of the Naga tribe. Although many thoughts came to his mind, after looking around at the sea tribe army, Harps wisely chose to submit to this seemingly unreliable queen. Afterwards, nearly 100 Bay people from the entire Hormuz Bay tribe migrated to the center of the Hormuz Basin under the protection of the troops led by Her Majesty the Queen. And on the way of migration, Harps finally had a certain understanding of the army that conquered his tribe and the strength behind them. Of course, all this understanding came from Her Majesty the Queen. Those fish monsters and strange mermaids didn't seem to like to communicate. Her Majesty the Queen called herself Ashura, but Harps knew another name of Queen Ashura, 3 words with very strange pronunciations, Tanyajia. This was accidentally revealed by Queen Ashura during the conversation, and Harps wisely pretended not to hear it. It seems that, because they hadn't communicated with people for a long time, Queen Ashura and Harps talked a lot along the way. Like now, Harps knows a lot of information about this sea tribe force that calls itself the Naga tribe. Like the most numerous small green fish monsters, their names are Mugger Plunderers. The blood-red small fish monsters holding bone staffs are called Ocean Blood Witches, and are said to have a little healing ability. There is also a dark purple medium-sized fish monster called the Ocean Hunter, and there are more than these 3 types of fish monsters in the Naga tribe. The lizard-like sea monsters swimming above the troops have a very domineering name, Flying Dragons. Although their strength is not as good as the legendary dragons, and they don't seem to be able to fly, but judging from the marine creatures hunted by these flying dragons along the way, their strength is enough to match that of ordinary sharks. And those sea tribes that look a bit like mermaids are nobles among the Naga tribe. The thinner female mermaids holding weapons between spears and staffs are called Naga Siren. This Naga Siren looks small and has no strength. But according to Queen Ashura's triumphant boasting, Harps was surprised to learn that all Naga Siren are magicians. This is a rare thing in the ocean, where magic power is scarce. As for the smallest number of huge mermaids with sturdy bodies and strong arms, Harps had already known the strength of these sea tribes called Naga thugs when they smashed the shells of 2 berry people. According to Queen Ashura, the army that came to visit their berry people tribe this time was only 1/5 of the Naga army. And Harps's premonition was correct before. The entire Hormuz Basin has been completely occupied by the Naga tribe. Sea tribes such as the Shark people, who were originally of high status, were slaughtered and sacrificed in the tidal temple because they were unwilling to surrender. Some sea tribes who were as sensible as Harps were gathered in the central part of the Hormuz Basin, waiting for Queen Ashura's decision. Not only that, Harps learned from Queen Ashura that the Naga tribe did not suddenly appear in the Hormuz Basin, but migrated here from the east of the Hormuz Basin. As for the reason for the migration, Harps felt cold all over and never dared to have any small thoughts. Uncle, are you asking why the Naga had to cross mountains and ridges, sea ridges, to come to the Hormuz Basin? There is no other way. The sea tribes living in the place where we were originally staying have been almost killed, and the rest have surrendered. For the development of the Naga tribe, of course they have to migrate. Looking at Queen Ashura, who was playing with the pearls offered by the berry people and saying these words with a bright smile on her face, Harps apologized in fear and retreated back to the team of the berry people. Staying among the tribesmen, Harps finally stabilized his emotions. Fortunately, during the conversation with Queen Ashura for a long time, he thought that Queen Ashura was still a young and playful girl. When the girl said with a smile on her face, the sea tribes living there have been almost killed, Harps realized that the real queen was not someone he could see through. Harps, who has lived for more than 200 years, seems to have seen that the blood of the sea people flows throughout the ocean. After another half-day's journey, the berry people finally followed the Naga army to their destination. This was originally the territory of the Shark people, the overlord of the Hormuz Basin, and the most central location of the Hormuz Basin. Harps came here a few years ago, but now it has become completely different from before. The Shark people who kept swimming have long disappeared, and the market, where the sea people came and went, has been replaced by some strange buildings. With the introduction of Queen Azura, harps, who was granted permission to follow the queen's coral bed, also learned what these buildings are. Those small buildings that are the largest in number and seem to be made of corals are called coral reefs, where members of the Naga tribe live. Harps even saw sea people such as Akula shrimp people and Foon's electric eel people in these coral reefs. It seems that these sea people, who were originally native to the Hormuz Basin, are like the Belly people, and they have surrendered to the Naga tribe. Apart from the coral reefs, there are only 4 types of buildings left. One is the second largest number of buildings, which are similar to sea wells and concentrated in a small open space. Queen Azura calls it the spawning ground. It is said that the dragons and Naga thugs are trained from the spawning ground. There are also some buildings that look like temples scattered among countless coral reefs. The triumphant Queen Azura told harps that the name of these buildings is the Temple of Queen Azura, which is responsible for training Naga witches and promoting the belief in the great Queen Azura. There is a statue standing on each of these Queen Azura temples, and the more harps looks at them, the more he feels that these statues are very similar to the triumphant Queen Azura next to him. The remaining 2 types of buildings have only one each. One is an enlarged version of the Queen's temple, which is called the Tide God. The slaughtered shark people and other rebellious races were sacrificed in the Tide Temple, thus obtaining the energy to maintain the survival and development of the Naga. There is also a building called the Abyss Altar. However, Queen Azura only mentioned the name of this building and did not introduce it in any other way. Harps was also very sensible and did not ask any more questions. When they arrived at the Tidal Temple, the Hormuz people were led by some fish monsters to live in coral reefs, while Queen Azura was carried into the Tidal Temple by the Naga thugs. Chapter 253 Right City Auction. Several sturdy Naga thugs carried Queen Azura's coral bed into the Tidal Temple and carefully placed it on the ground of the main hall of the temple. With a wave of Azura's hand, several Naga thugs left the Tidal Temple. After the Naga thugs filed out of the temple gate, the mysterious Queen Azura placed the 2 huge pearls she had been playing with on the side of the coral bed, and then lay lazily on the bed. Oh, it's so tiring to be a queen. That Biranuncle is not easy to fool. I have to pretend to be an iron-blooded queen to live in peace. Talking to herself, Azura changed her posture and lay flat on the coral bed, looking at the dome of the Tidal Temple. When can I go back? It's so annoying here. There is no computer, and no computer. It's so boring. Azura gritted her teeth. The key is, what kind of strange creatures are there around here? The cute girl complained. Mermaids, Naga, are not beautiful at all, and those marine fish monsters are not beautiful at all. I thought there would be some handsome men and beautiful women among the indigenous sea tribes, but the only human-like bee people have 2 wings on their backs. It's not good at all. After thinking for a while with her head tilted, Azura made a decision in her heart, and then suddenly sat up, raised her hands to the dome of the temple, and shouted fanatically, "God, give me a handsome man." 2 days later, the integrated indigenous sea tribes, under the coercion of the Naga tribe, began to move towards the east of the Hormuz Basin. This team includes 4/5 of the Naga army and a large number of Mugger slaves. Together with the indigenous sea tribes who surrendered to the Naga tribe, the entire team has more than 10,000 people. Such a large team, because they are all sea people who can swim freely in the water, the speed of travel is not slow. In less than a day, they arrived at the small trench where the Hormuz tribe once lived. Next, they crossed the trench, walked out of the Hormuz Basin, and headed further east. And further east is the Shallow Sea area. Further east of the Shallow Sea area is the Slays continent where the sea people have hardly set foot. Dividing line. Yufei certainly didn't know what happened in the distant sea. At this time, 4 days had passed since his elf king clone left the port of O'Brien. Because the speed and endurance of ordinary horses are really far behind the Holy Giant Wolf, after leaving the O'Brien territory, the Holy Giant Wolf took over the task of pulling the cart from the strong yellow-brown horse in the hoof. As for the yellow-brown horse, that was not good at pulling the cart. It naturally went into the stomach of the Holy Giant Wolf. The Elf King's Court of Slays is located at the southern end of the continent. After knowing the specific location, Yufei wisely gave up the plan to visit the Elf King's court in just 1 month. although it is still possible to run from a Berlin port to the Elf King's court and back in 1 month with the speed of the holy giant wolf. If something happens in the middle, it may not be able to catch up with the Night Elves' massive attack on the human world. Besides, according to Euphenia's understanding, the elves are not far from being in a state of disintegration. The Elf King's court and the Elf Queen exist more as a symbolic thing, with greater symbolic significance than practical significance. Only about 1/10 of the elves' strength is concentrated in the Elf King's court, and the other 9/10 have turned into tribes of various sizes distributed in the forests or grasslands of Eslays. Every elf tribe, whether it is a forest elf or a grassland elf, is managed by elders, and the Great Elder is the highest manager. And this elder is generally the strongest elf in the elf tribe. It is precisely because the power of the elves cannot be twisted together that humans dare to secretly hunt some elves and sell them to nobles and wealthy businessmen as slaves. It is also because of this that Euphenie gave up the idea of going to the Elf King's court. Even if this trip reached some cooperation or alliance agreements with the local Elf King's court in Eslays, the appeal of the King's court is not enough to mobilize the entire elf tribe, not to mention that there are differences between forest elves and grassland elves within the elves. And the elves that cannot be fully mobilized. Euphenie really doesn't think much of that power. Maybe there are some legendary or even epic powerhouses or even mythical figures in the Elf King's court, but the Night Elves are on the road to hegemony, and these powerhouses can't play a big role in the million-strong army. However, although he gave up the plan to visit the Elf King's court, Euphenie was still prepared to have some intersections with the local elves in Eslays. After finding out the location of the largest elf tribe in the Holy Lion Empire, Euphenie urged the Holy Giant Wolf to quietly change the direction of advance, and drove towards the border between the eastern part of the Holy Lion Empire and a kingdom. 3 days later, a strange carriage pulled by a magic wolf drove into the City of Light on the eastern border of the Holy Lion Empire. When entering Light, Euphenie was surprised to find that this border town was actually quite prosperous, and there were actually a lot of carriages entering the city with him. After all, Euphenia's identity as Earl O'Brien was also a nobleman. In Chilled Castle, relying on his strong mental power, Euphenie also read a lot of books in the library of the St. Chilled family. Some of these books are dedicated to introducing human nobles on the Eslays continent. Every noble family has its own unique emblem, even the newly enfeoffed nobles. Like Euphenie himself, the noble emblem for the identity of Earl O'Brien is a towering tree, and the background is the map of the Eslays continent. It contains the ambition of the Night Elves to conquer the entire Eslays. After reading these books introducing nobles and noble emblems, Euphenie, who has a strong memory, can already be called a heraldry scholar. Just as he was riding in a wolf carriage into the City of Right, he saw a car with the emblem of Marquis of the Holy Lion Empire also entering the City of Right. After entering the City of Right, Euphenie was surprised to find that most of the carriages on the street had an emblem of a noble, ranging from baron to marquis. Euphenie even found the family emblem of a duke in the kingdom that bordered the Holy Lion Empire in this direction. What's going on? Euphenie was a little confused. How come this small City of Right has so many nobles pouring in, not just from one country? Puzzled, Euphenie shrugged his shoulders, temporarily put aside this question, and found a hotel to stay. After sitting in the lobby of the hotel for a while, through the exploration of spiritual power, Euphenie understood why so many nobles suddenly poured into this City of Right. It turned out that 2 days later, the annual auction of Right City would start. If Right City is just a small border town of the Holy Lion Empire, what can be worth so many nobles to participate in the auction? Don't say it, it really exists. As the saying goes, live by the mountain, eat by the mountain, live by the water, eat by the water. Although there are no special products around Right City, there is an elf tribe. With an elf tribe, it is natural to make a fortune by relying on elves. On the surface, the official forces of Right City are doing formal trade with the forest elf Avis tribe on the border, exchanging food and other necessities of life for handmade ornaments produced by the elf tribe and some elves' homemade bows and arrows. Secretly, Right City hides many slave catching teams, relying on secretly capturing elves to make a fortune. Although it is impossible to capture too many elves in a year or dare not to capture too many elves, there are elf slaves auctioned at the auction in Right City every year. So on the days approaching the auction, nobles who are interested in buying elf ornaments and bows and arrows, or preparing to buy an elf slave directly to take home, all rushed to Right City. After hearing this news, Yufei became interested in the auction in Right City. He simply did not plan to enter the Abyss Forest directly, and waited until he attended the auction before visiting the elf tribe here. 2 days passed quickly, and the annual auction of Light City was held as scheduled. Yufei did not book any private rooms. Although he could get a private room at the auction house if he revealed his identity as an Imperial Earl, he did not intend to reveal his identity. There were many people in the auction house who were dressed in black robes like him, so Yufei was very comfortable to put himself among the people who were hiding their heads and showing their tails. The auction was quite dull at the beginning. Although the ornaments made by the elves were very exquisite, most of the people who came to the auction did not come for these things. The ornaments made by the elves could also be bought in other places, and the nobles who came here specially did not care much. When it came to the auction of the bows and arrows of the elves, the scene became a little more lively. After all, the elves are good at archery, and the bows and arrows they make are much better than those made by human craftsmen. The nobles in the private rooms also made several bids during the auction of bows and arrows, and their handwriting was indeed not comparable to that of the small nobles sitting in the hall. As the elf bows and arrows were gradually auctioned off, the Right City auction was drawing to a close. The end was exactly when the atmosphere of the auction was at its most heated. Although they knew that the next auction items were not something that the little nobles like them could get their hands on, and they could only watch the people in the box bidding, none of the people sitting in the hall left. As the auctioneer stirred up the atmosphere, the final auction items were also placed in several wooden cages covered with red cloth and carried onto the auction table. Chapter 254 Nicole's Prayer. Everyone knew that the cages covered by red cloth might contain the most precious auction items of the entire auction. Elves. Yufei had already probed several cages with his spiritual power and checked them out. There were a total of 5 elves auctioned at the Right City auction this time, 3 of which were female elves and 2 were male elves. According to Yufei's observation, these elves were all bronze to silver level, but they seemed to have been forced to take drugs, and their bodies were in a state of weakness. Next, under the excited eyes of the crowd and the increasingly attractive words of the auctioneer on the stage, the red cloth covering the wooden cages was uncovered one by the staff. At the same time, Yufei heard that the breathing around him had obviously become heavier. Looking at the 5 elves in the wooden cages, who were deliberately dressed up half exposed, Yufei frowned. Looking at the red eyes and heavy breathing of the people around him, Yufei couldn't help but secretly despise these so-called upper-class people in his heart. When the red cloth was unveiled, the elves in the 5 wooden cages showed a look of panic on their faces, but after seeing the people in the hall, they calmed down. However, Yufei could see that this was not the kind of calmness that did not care, but the silence of despair. He frowned again. Although he remained calm on the surface, looking at the familiar long ears, Yufei made a decision in his heart. Then, the 5 elves began to be auctioned. The small nobles or wealthy businessmen sitting in the hall wisely did not bid, but listened eagerly to the real upper class people sitting in the box bidding. Although everyone who came to Light City did not want to buy an elf slave, the goods this time were relatively small, and it was obviously not something that people who could only sit in the hall could bid for. Sure enough, the reserve price of these 5 elves was enough to make most small nobles and ordinary wealthy businessmen give up 100,000 gold coins. Yufei was a little surprised why the price of male elves and female elves was the same, but after thinking about the alternative fetishes of some nobles and the corrupt private lives of some noble ladies, he was relieved. Although he wanted to rescue these elves, Yufei did not participate in the bidding. He just listened to the bids of the bidders in the box. In his mind, he calculated how much energy an elf could sell as the price of elves continued to rise. The prices of the 5 elves were mostly between 500,000 and 700,000 gold coins. Only one female elf who looked particularly beautiful was pushed up to 1 million gold coins by 2 bidders. Yufei couldn't help but smack his lips. Just using these gold coins can convert a large amount of energy, and using these gold coins to buy low-level magic cores can convert more energy. In the hands of the Night Elves, these energies can train far more than 5 Night Elves. Shaking his head, Yufei threw away the idea that popped up in his mind. After all, he is the father god of the Night Elves, and he will never do things like selling his own people. After the 5 elves were auctioned one by one, the auction of this year in Right City ended. After all, elves are not so easy to catch. If you really piss off the elf tribe in the Abyss Forest, there will be no good consequences for Light City. On the surface, humans and elves still live in harmony. Selling a small number of captured elves once a year is already the limit. Since the auction is over, there is nothing to see here. Following the surging flow of people, Yufei quietly walked out of the auction house. The moment he walked out of the auction house, Yufei flashed and disappeared directly into the crowd, and no one around him felt strange. Viscount Walter sat in the carriage, looking at the graceful figure tied up and lying on the seat in the spacious carriage, and he was very satisfied. Following the name of his father, Marquis Walter, he finally snapped up an elf beauty. Although she is not the most beautiful girl, Viscount Walter is already very satisfied. For a long time, the old man in the family had secretly hidden an elf slave girl and never let anyone touch her. Now he can finally enjoy the taste of the elf with these thoughts in his mind. Viscount Walter was young and energetic after all, and he couldn't help but prepare to start eating meat in the carriage. Nicole, who was lying on the seat, was conscious but still had no strength in her body. At this time, she looked at Viscount Walter with a disgusting smile on his face and began to take off his clothes. She couldn't act calm anymore. Although she had expected it in her heart, when the time came, Nicole, who had never experienced anything in her life, couldn't help but panic. She twisted her body desperately, but how could she break free from the ropes on her body after being drugged? After struggling desperately for a while, Nicole gave up twisting. She really had no strength. Looking at Viscount Walter, who had taken off only his underwear, Nicole closed her eyes tightly, and 2 tears oozed from the corners of her eyes. Great Moon Goddess, please save your people. After a long time, Nicole suddenly realized that the disgusting human noble had not violated her yet, so she carefully opened her eyes. What came into view was no longer the human noble, but a figure in a black robe. As for the disgusting young noble, he fell on the floor of the carriage, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Did the goddess hear my prayer? Nicole thought so in her heart, and looked at the mysterious man in black robe with a puzzled look. The mysterious man did not speak, and the eyes hidden under the hood seemed to look at Nicole, and then he floated up out of thin air, and flew out of the open window like a leisurely stroll. At the same time, Nicole was surprised to find that she was also floating out of thin air, and flew out of the window with the mysterious man. Then, Nicole's eyes went black and she fainted. When she woke up, Nicole suddenly found that she was lying on a bed. Could it be that she had just escaped from the tiger's den and entered the wolf's den? Nicole's heart sank. However, Nicole, who had just woken up, found that she seemed to be sandwiched between 2 bodies. Isn't it evil equals? And when she woke up, the people on both sides also woke up with a groan. At this time, Nicole found that the ropes on her body had been untied, and even the strength suppressed by the potion had recovered. Lying next to her were 2 sisters who were captured and auctioned together by humans. Are you awake? A calm voice sounded, and the mysterious man who saved her appeared beside the bed. Chapter 255, Stunning Beauty. Nicole did not respond to the mysterious man's words, but looked at him suspiciously. She was relieved when she saw the 2 male elves lying on the ground. It seemed that the mysterious man had no ill will towards her and the others. He even rescued the other 4 companions. It must be said that he was really powerful. The mysterious man seemed to see Nicole's suspicion and chuckled. Please change these clothes. As he spoke, the mysterious man waved his hand, and several clothes fell on the bed. Then he turned and walked out of the room. Nicole and the 2 female elves who had just woken up were slightly stunned. They looked at each other and looked shyly at the clothes that were deliberately torn on their bodies. Then they quickly changed into the clothes prepared by the mysterious man. The 2 male elves also woke up at this time, but they did not get the treatment of new clothes. It seemed that he knew that Nicole and the others had changed their clothes. With a squeak, the mysterious man pushed open the door and walked in. Seeing the 5 elves who had stood up from the bed and the ground still with a vigilant look, the mysterious man shook his head and took off the hood of the black robe. In an instant, a pair of pointed ears and a stunning face were revealed, and Nicole and others were stunned for a moment. When they saw the ears, the 5 elves breathed a sigh of relief and relaxed. Although the elves now are not as united as they were in the Elf Empire, since they are elves, they will never harm their compatriots. Even the differences between forest elves and grassland elves will not be so great as to harm their compatriots. Since they were rescued by a powerful elf predecessor, they are safe. However, when the extremely beautiful face of Eufena's elf king clone was revealed, the 3 female elves, including the most beautiful one who was auctioned for millions of gold coins, couldn't help but feel ashamed. I saw that this face was really like a pearl with a halo, a beautiful jade with a bright glow. It was also like flowers and trees piled with snow, and the bright moon was condensed with frost. The face was as white as goose fat, the lips were like cherry blossoms, the eyebrows were like ink painting, and the spirit was like autumn water. It was really the most elegant and refined that the elves had never seen before, and there was an indescribable softness and delicate feeling. However, after feeling ashamed of herself, Nicole discovered something that shocked her to the extreme. Extremely shocked, Nicole couldn't help but shout out, You don't. This senior is actually a man. The other 4 elves who were in a daze heard Nicole's shouting, and then they suddenly realized that under this beautiful face, there was actually an Adam's apple! Exclamation mark. Suddenly, the eyes of several elves became weird. Although male elves are generally more delicate, it is generally easier to distinguish the gender of elves from their appearance. There are male elves with more feminine appearance in the tribe, but it is the first time to see a male elf who is so beautiful that even the elf beauties feel ashamed. No wonder this senior has to wear a hooded robe all the time. Even if the elf's ears can be covered with magic, such a beautiful face will still cause big trouble. Those dirty humans don't care whether you are male or female. The elves never thought that Eufena's magic could not cover up the elf's identity. Eufena saw the reactions of the elves and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But now that the identity of the elves has been revealed, Eufena calmly put on the hood again, covering the beautiful face, leaving only the chin exposed. When Eufena's face was covered, the elves couldn't help but sigh. Such a beautiful face has been hidden under the black robe. It is really a loss for the whole laser. These sighs made Eufena even more embarrassed, but after all, it was the clothes that Eufena specially selected. After the hood was put on, other people would definitely not be able to observe the face and expression of the wearer, and this embarrassing look was not discovered by the elves. After a slight cough, breaking the weird atmosphere in the room, Eufena spoke. Hello everyone, I'm Alan Abner, the elf elder from the Whispering Wind Forest. May I ask if you are the elves of the Avis tribe? Several elves looked at each other in confusion. Whispering Wind Forest? Is there an elf tribe there? It seems that no elves have lived in the Whispering Wind Forest before, and more than 20 years ago, it was said that the Whispering Wind Forest was occupied by some strange and powerful creatures, and no intelligent races passed through it, let alone settled there. However, the doubt was only for a moment. After all, this respected elf elder saved himself and others, and he should be thanked. Several elves spoke at the same time. Nicole, Dennis, Jenna, 30th, of the Avis tribe thanks Elder Alan for saving his life. Several elves had no doubts about Eufena's self-proclaimed identity as an elf elder. With such a strong strength, it is natural for him to become the elder of a tribe. The elves even had a vague feeling that perhaps the great elder of the Avis tribe was not as strong as this Elder Alan, right? No need to thank me. As an elf, it is my duty to help rescue my compatriots when I see them suffering. Although those hateful humans have not had the chance to invade you, I have made them pay with their lives. It's just that. At this point, Eufena deliberately sighed and stopped talking. Sure enough, as Eufena expected, Nicole spoke. Why is Elder Alan sighing? Nice. Eufena seemed to see a certain king saying to Tangseng, why is the elder sighing? Then, Eufena said casually, it's a pity for my eldest disciple Sun Wu. Fortunately, Eufena realized it himself halfway through. Damn, director. The script was wrong. Taking a deep breath, Eufena calmed down and started pretending to be awesome. I'm sighing. Why are the elves so decadent now? Even the tiny human race dares to privately capture and even sell us elves? What is going on? Hearing Euphenia's words, the 3 beautiful elves were shocked, and the 2 male elves were also shocked, staring at Euphenia in shock. The elves today. The tiny human race. Doesn't this Elder Alan understand the current status of the elves at all? And the word now really makes the elves think deeply. Sighing at the elves today. Then Elder Alan is not the elf of today. If this is the case, it would be incredible. 4 updates are prepared today. This is the first chapter, and I ask for your encouragement. Chapter 256, Looting in Chaos. Nicole and other elves were a little excited, and they were making all kinds of guesses about Euphenia's true identity. Euphenia was originally prepared to let the elves misunderstand, in order to implement his next plan. After sighing, he did not explain anymore. At this time, many thoughts came to Nicole's mind. After standing there for a while, she finally spoke to break the slightly solemn atmosphere in the room. Elder Alan, you asked us before if we are elves from the Avis tribe. Do you want to visit our Avis tribe? In fact, I am. Nicole's words were not finished yet, and the sudden noise outside interrupted her words. Several elves frowned and listened to the outside world. As time went by, the noise outside became louder and louder, and it was obvious that the sound of swords and guns colliding and the clanging of armored soldiers walking could be heard. Why is the army of Right City mobilized? Nicole exclaimed. Right City is a border city of the Holy Lion Empire after all, and the army stationed there is a relatively strong one, otherwise they would not dare to provoke the elf tribe in a small area. Euphenia responded calmly, maybe it's because the nobles who bought you are of high status, and now they are all dead. Although he said this, Euphenia knew very well in his heart that Right City did send out troops, but they were not targeting these elves and himself. Because under the induction of Euphenia's spiritual power, the army of Right City did not gather at the hotel where he was. Euphenia was also confident that he had not exposed his tracks. More than half of the troops in the entire Right City were rushing to the walls of Right City. From the shouts of the officers, Euphenia learned that it seemed that there were enemies invading Right City. It was almost dusk when the auction was over, and it had been a while since Euphenia rescued the 5 elves. During the time when the 5 elves were unconscious, the night had quietly enveloped Right City. But Right City at this time was not as quiet as usual, but brightly lit. In the mansion of the City Lord of Right City, the City Lord Viscount Wright was pacing back and forth anxiously. Is the Avis tribe crazy? How dare they attack our Right City? Isn't the Avis Elder afraid that the army of the Holy Lion Empire will crush their tribe? Viscount Wright said angrily, sitting back on his chair. The butler of the City Lord's mansion, Condrab, who had been standing behind the City Lord's seat, said, yes, Viscount. Although the Avis tribe knew something about the auction of elves in our city, they have never dared to have a direct conflict with us due to the power of the Empire. This time they actually attacked our Right City openly, which is really strange. After a pause, seeing Viscount Wright signaling him to continue, Conrad also expressed his own judgment. Perhaps, among the 5 elves auctioned at this auction, there are more important figures from the Avis tribe. Viscount Wright stood up suddenly. Yes, it must be like this. Those elves were mysteriously rescued before, and even those big shots died in this city. I was worried about this matter, but I didn't expect that one wave of trouble would come after another. It must be related to those 5 elves. Then, Viscount Light became angry again. The 5 elves have been rescued, and the Avis tribe dared to attack our Light City. Do these elves really not take the Empire seriously? Viscount Light had no idea that it was not the people of the Avis tribe who rescued the elves and killed those nobles. Forget it, there is no time to speculate about these things now. Let's resist the invading elves first. As he said, Viscount Light put on armor and led his personal guards to the east wall. By the way, Butler Condrab, quickly send a message to the nearby cities with magic, saying that the Avis tribe is going to go to war with the Empire and is attacking Light City. Let them come to support quickly. After riding on the warhorse, Viscount Light said to Condrab, and Condrab naturally followed the order and went to do it. At this time, Euphenia also roughly understood what was going on. He turned his head, which was originally tilted to listen to the outside sounds, to several elves, with a smile on his lips. Don't be nervous. With the strength of this Right City, it is impossible to discover you under my protection. the army of Right City was dispatched because the Avis tribe actually came to attack Right City. Before the elves had digested this information, Yufei continued to ask, "It seems that one of you has a special identity?" The 5 elves looked at each other awkwardly again, and then Nicole took the lead in explaining to Yufei. "Respected Elder Allen, I just wanted to reveal my identity to you, but was interrupted by the noise outside." After a pause, seeing that Yufei did not react, Nicole continued, "My father is the great elder of the Avis tribe. If the army outside was really mobilized because of the attack of our tribe, it must be because my father found out that I was captured by humans, that he came to Right City to ask for me." Several other elves later confirmed this. Yufei was also a little surprised. He didn't expect that he would rescue a princess of the Avis tribe. Now it should be easier for him to contact the Avis tribe. So he teased Nicole, "I didn't expect Miss Nicole to be a princess." Since the great elder of Avis did not hesitate to provoke the Holy Lion Empire to rescue his daughter, what do you think about the next step? Nicole's face flushed. "Elder Allen, you can't call me princess casually. It should be very unsafe outside now. We want to take shelter here with Elder Allen for the time being, and wait until it's calm outside or there are new changes, before looking for our people. Is that okay?" After Nicole revealed her identity to Yufei, the other 4 elves looked up to Nicole, obviously letting Nicole represent them with full authority. Nicole's ideas were more conservative, and Yufei wanted to contact other elf tribes as soon as possible, so he naturally would not adopt Nicole's method. Well, it seems that Elder Rives will not give up until he finds his daughter. Right City will not be peaceful for a while. You guys just stay here. No one will disturb you. I'm going to go out and check the situation. It would be best if I can talk to Elder Rives. It will make him feel relieved and withdraw his troops. Then it will be easier to get you out of Right City. After a pause, Yufei added, "Don't worry about safety issues. People in the hotel will not come to test a wizard's room for no reason. What's more, your strength has been restored, right?" For this trip, Yufei chose the identity of a wandering wizard. After hearing Yufei's words, several elves exchanged a few words and agreed. They were rescued by Yufei, and now they are also under Yufei's protection, so naturally they can only obey Yufei's arrangements. "Respected Elder Allen, although you are our compatriot, my father may not believe that we have been rescued by you. Let me give you a token so that my father can believe your identity." As she said that, Nicole took out a sachet and handed it to Yufei. Seeing Nicole's blushing face and thinking of Nicole's half-ragged clothes before, the sachet must have been hidden by Nicole close to her body. Smelling the fragrance from the sachet, which was not sure whether it was the spice or the fragrance of Nicole, Yufei was a little speechless for a while. However, the speechlessness was only temporary. Since he had already explained it to the elves, Yufei no longer hesitated. After saying goodbye, he walked out of the room. In the room, the elves looked at each other for a few times, and then they all found a place to sit down and rest and calm down. After leaving the door, Yufei did not go directly to the east wall of Right City, although there was already a deafening cry of killing there. Taking advantage of the fact that the army of Right City, including the patrol army that maintained law and order, was transferred to the city wall for defense, Yufei naturally wanted to do something that was not beneficial to others but only to himself. First, Yufei came to the Right City auction house, which he had just left. A lot of gold coins flowed into the auction house at the auction just now. The Slaves continent has not yet produced magic crystal cards and the like. At most, there are some gold notes and the like. Now there must be a lot of wealth in the Right City auction house. Sure enough, Yufei, who sneaked into the auction house quietly, found tens of millions of gold coins and other materials in a secret warehouse. Fortunately, when he left O'Brienport, he asked for 2 small space rings from the Stanley Chamber of Commerce and vacated the space in his original space ring. Otherwise it would not be able to hold so many gold coins and magic cores that were about to be obtained tonight. Yufei was not only preparing to rob the auction house. After quietly robbing the Right City auction house of the gold coins and magic cores that he had just obtained and had saved before, Yufei rushed to the next target, hiding his body and name. He did not touch anything other than the gold coins and magic cores. One because he did not need them, and the other because he thought those things took up space. Perhaps those materials can be used to exchange for some magic cores, but Yufei is most afraid of trouble, so he is too lazy to do it. Moreover, if the magic cores are exchanged, when the fleet of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce is built, the enchanted equipment produced by the Hunter Hole will be transported from the far North Sea to the human world. The energy that can be exchanged is not comparable to these materials. Yufei's second goal is the City Lord's mansion in Wright City. The detection of mental power has just made Yufei realize that the City Lord's mansion now has no defense force except for a dozen guards and some servants. However, Yufei is now a thief rather than a robber. He still entered the City Lord's mansion in secret. This is the second chapter of today, and there are 2 more chapters that will be broadcast to you later. All kinds of encouragement are requested. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 257, Heart of the Earth. With his strong mental power, Yufei easily found the treasury of the Lord's mansion and Viscount Wright's own private vault. After skillfully looting all the gold coins and magic cores in the treasury of the Lord's mansion, Yufei flashed into Viscount Wright's private vault. Before entering the private vault, he also knocked out a butler-like man who was fiddling with a magic circle in Viscount Wright's study. Viscount Wright, who was confidently talking to the invading elves, would never have thought that the reinforcement he was counting on from other nearby imperial cities might not arrive. Poor butler Kandra had just finished fiddling with the magic circle for communication when he was knocked out by Yufei and was unable to contact the nearby city lords. Of course, Yufei would not care about Viscount Wright. He only cared about gold coins and magic cores. Well, this Viscount Wright is also good at making money. While Yufei was collecting the gold coins and magic cores from Viscount Wright's private vault with his space ring, he was looking at the basement with night pearls on the walls and golden jewels scattered on the ground. Suddenly, Yufei felt something unusual in his space ring. This space ring is not full. What's going on? Yufei probed into the space ring he got first with his mental power and found the source of the abnormality. It was this thing! Exclamation mark. Taking out the Heart of Flame that he accidentally got from the caravan from the space ring, Yufei found that the Heart of Flame was flickering. Could it be that there are other components of the Heart of Eternity here? The Heart of Eternity is a necessary item for Yufei's body to upgrade to the Tree of Eternity. It needs to be synthesized with 6 treasures: the Heart of Flame, the Heart of the Ocean, the Heart of the Earth, the Heart of the Sky, the Heart of Light, and the Heart of Darkness. By chance, Yufei got the Heart of Flame, but there was no news about the other 5 hearts. It is said that the Heart of Light is the jewel on the crown of the current Emperor of the Holy Lion Empire, but Yufei did not go to confirm it before, so to this day he still only has the Heart of Flame. However, today the Heart of Flame suddenly reacted, which made Yufei very happy. The Heart of Eternity is of great significance to Yufei. Only when the main body is upgraded to the Tree of Eternity can the Night Elves have the ultimate soldier chimera, and the more advanced technology unlocked after upgrading to the Tree of Eternity will also make the overall strength of the entire Night Elves take a big step forward. Yufei began to carefully search for items that may be components of the Heart of Eternity in Viscount Light's private library. According to the information previously queried, the Heart of Darkness is in the Demon World, the Heart of the Ocean is in the Boundless Ocean, and the Heart of Light is controlled by the Holy Lion Empire. Now the Heart of Flame is in his hands, but he doesn't know whether the component he can get this time will be the Heart of the Sky or the Heart of the Earth. Soon, through the weak connection between the Heart of Flame and other components, Yufei found a golden round bead like amber under the search of his powerful mental power. The moment he got the round bead, Yufei knew it clearly. This one is the Heart of the Earth, which represents the soil among the 6 hearts. He has obtained 2 of the 6 components of the Heart of Eternity. Viscount Wright actually put this precious Heart of the Earth together with those ordinary jewels, which is really a waste of natural resources. However, Yufei can also understand that divine objects are hidden. Before the 6 components of the Heart of Eternity show their magical properties, ordinary people will definitely not recognize these hearts. Haha, considering that Viscount Wright let me get the Heart of the Earth unexpectedly, I should hurry to the city wall to contact the people of the elven tribe of Ivus to save Viscount Wright's life. Yufei was in a very good mood after getting the Heart of the Earth. After putting the golden magic core in Viscount Wright's private vault into the space ring, he thought so. As for the original plan, to rob other places in Wright City, Yufei gave up on it. The bulk of Wright City's resources are in the auction house warehouse and the city lord's mansion that were presented to the Empire. Since the treasures in these 2 places have been obtained, Yufei doesn't bother to care about the other mosquito legs. At this time, Viscount Wright was not as happy as Yufei. Of course, if he knew that the treasure house of the city lord's mansion and his own private warehouse had been looted by Yufei, he would probably be in a worse mood. Elder Ivus, let's not beat around the bush. This Viscount admits that the auction and the city auctioned elves before, but that was done by those adventurers and slave hunting teams, and it has nothing to do with my Wright City. Viscount Wright was obviously lying with his eyes open, and few of the elves under the city believed him. Viscount Wright also knew that the elves would not believe his words, and even he would not believe this nonsense, but he still had to do the superficial work. After all, on the surface, the Empire and the elves still live in harmony, and they cannot tear each other apart blatantly. My Light City is a territory of the Holy Lion Empire. Elder Ives, you must think clearly about the consequences of attacking the border cities of the Empire. Viscount Light was a little tough, as if to warn the elves, but then his tone softened. Elder Ives, it is indeed wrong to sell elves, but you have already sent elves to rescue the 5 elves. Why are you still standing guard under Light City? Are you really not afraid of the Empire's army? Among the elves under the city, a handsome middle-aged male elf who was obviously in a leadership position frowned when he heard what Viscount Light said. Nicole and the others were rescued? What's going on? I didn't send elves to sneak into Light City to rescue them. As soon as I learned that his daughter was captured by humans, Elder Ives immediately led the warriors in the tribe to stand guard under Light City. Because it was already late when he got the news, Elder Ives, who knew what the hateful humans would do to the elves, did not think much and immediately led his troops to rescue Nicole and the others. Could it be that this was the excuse of the city lord, just to delay time? Elder Ives knew the horror of the Holy Lion Empire, and also understood that several nearby human cities might soon learn about the situation in Wright City and send troops to support it. Although the elves as a whole are not afraid of the Holy Lion Empire, the elves today are not as united as they were thousands of years ago. The Ivus tribe is just a relatively large elf tribe, and it can't afford to offend the Holy Lion Empire. But this time, my daughter was captured by humans. Judith, I was too cowardly at the beginning, so I lost the person I loved most, and now I may lose our daughter. How can I retreat? Exclamation mark. Gritting his teeth, Elder Ivus's eyes revealed a firm color. This time, I will save our daughter no matter what. Judith, I won't make the same mistake again. Lord Light, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I know you are stalling for time and waiting for reinforcement. I won't give you this opportunity. Within half a magic hour, hand over the 5 elves you have captured from our tribe. Otherwise after half a magic hour, I will lead thousands of warriors of our elves to flatten this Light City. The words of the great Elder Ives were so powerful that Viscount Light, who was standing on the city wall, was stunned. While speaking, the great Elder Ives also deliberately emitted his sky-level aura to oppress the human army on the city wall. He knew very well that there were no sky-level strongmen in Light City. Half a magic hour. Even if the nearest city reinforcement arrived, it would take a magic hour. Is the Ives tribe really going to tear each other apart this time? Damn it, hand over those 5 elves. How can I know where those 5 elves are now? You know, I called them out a long time ago. Viscount Light is really crying now. Just when Viscount Wright was considering whether to return home immediately, to pack up his belongings and escape, or wait for half a magic spell, and then fight for half a magic spell to wait for reinforcement, no one noticed that a vague figure flew down the city wall and came to the front of the elves. The light was dim at night, but this was not a big problem for the elves who had a certain night vision ability. Yufei was discovered by the elves just before he arrived at the elves' formation under the city. The method of using mental power to make people ignore one's existence can only be used on those who are not vigilant and have low strength. Elves like these who are strong and on guard will naturally not be affected by Yufei. Who is it? As the question rang out, dozens of elves' bows and arrows were aimed at Yufei. It is unlikely that someone who appears here at this time is a friend. But Yufei surprised the elves. He calmly lowered his hood. Instantly, the elves who saw Yufei's goddess-like face were stunned, and the pair of ears that were narrower and longer than those of ordinary elves were exposed. A quarter of magic hour later, the elf team lined up on the east wall of Light City suddenly retreated without a sound. This made Viscount Light, who finally made up his mind to return to the Lord's mansion, to pack up his belongings and escape, also stunned on the spot. Are those elves crazy? After arriving at Light City and saying a lot of harsh words, they just left quietly. Did the elves leave? After being on guard for a while, Viscount Light ordered half of the soldiers to continue to guard the city wall, and the other half to rest first. Viscount Light, who was relieved, walked towards his mansion, but he didn't know that his lord's mansion had been looted by a powerful thief. Nicole and other elves who were anxiously waiting in Yufei's room were fidgeting at this time. The words of Viscount Right and Great Elder Rives were transmitted through magic amplification, and several elves naturally heard them. Nicole and other elves who were waiting for Yufei to return suddenly heard the door of the room creak and opened. There is one more chapter, and the goal of 4 chapters will definitely be achieved. Please encourage me. Chapter 258 Visiting the Elvis Tribe. Several nervous elves turned their eyes to the door at the same time, and when they saw the strange but familiar black figure pushing the door in, they breathed a sigh of relief. Yufei, who walked into the room, spoke before the elves asked, "Nicole, I have met with your father, the Great Elder Avis. After he knew that you were safe, he withdrew his troops under my persuasion." Hearing this, Nicole was really relieved. As a princess of the Avis tribe, Nicole is not a little girl who is ignorant of the world. She also knows that if the Avis tribe really breaks up with the Holy Lion Empire, it will definitely not end well. By that time, the Elf King Court may not be able to be relied on. In addition to the entire tribe leaving their homeland and migrating far away, there is only one way to go: destruction. Now that my father has evacuated, naturally this incident will not turn into a big deal, which is the best result. Then respected Elder Allen, when can we return to the tribe? Nicole asked Yufei, and the other 4 elves also looked at Yufei with expectation. Yufei pondered for a moment and replied, "After all, we are elves, and it is not easy to conceal. If we all dress up like me, it will definitely arouse other people's suspicion." After thinking for a while, Yufei proposed a solution. "How about this? I will put you in my carriage at night. When the ban on Right City is lifted at dawn, I will take you out of the city. Those city guards will never dare to stop and check the carriage of a powerful wizard. After that, it will be easy to go to your tribe." Without thinking too much, Nicole and the others agreed to Yufei's proposal and entered his carriage under Yufei's cover. There was no conversation that night, and soon it was time for Right City to open the city the next day. After returning to the Lord's mansion last night, Viscount Right was heartbroken to find that the treasury of the Lord's mansion and the golden magic cores in his private vault had all disappeared. Later, his subordinates reported that the golden magic cores stored in the auction house in Right City were also all stolen, which made Viscount Right feel even more anxious. The treasury of the Lord's mansion and his own private vault were fine, but the property in the auction house had to be handed over to the Empire. If it was stolen, he had to take responsibility. Fortunately, except for the golden magic cores, other property was not lost. However, after weighing the pros and cons, and using the remaining property in the treasury and his own private vault to make up for the lost property in the auction house, Viscount Right painfully discovered that he had become penniless. Viscount Right gnashed his teeth at the thieves, who took advantage of the chaos in the city to steal his and the auction house's property. He even issued an unwise order to continue the city closure at dawn. This time he had stirred up a hornet's nest. It was already late when the auction in Right City ended yesterday. Most of the nobles and wealthy businessmen who participated in the auction stayed in Wright City overnight. The assassination of the 5 nobles who bought the elves and the failed attack on the city by the elves last night made these upper class people become frightened birds, and they wanted to leave Wright City as quickly as possible. While many people had been waiting for the city gates to open all night, Viscount Wright actually announced that the city would continue to be closed. Wouldn't this be a death sentence for those upper class people? Therefore, after learning of Viscount Wright's order, the people crowded at the city gate were boiling, and they all began to denounce Viscount Wright. Among these people, there was more than one noble whose title was almost the same as Viscount Wright, and whose power was much stronger than him. Under the joint pressure of this group of people, Viscount Wright realized how powerless his city ban order was. With a weak wave of his hand, Viscount Wright asked Butler Condrab, who had been in a state of shame since he was rescued last night, to announce the lifting of the city ban order. Alas, all the losses can only be borne by himself now. Viscount Wright, who was powerless, lay on the city lord's throne, staring at the ceiling with lifeless eyes. Driving the eye-catching wolf car, Ufeli drove out of Wright City leisurely. He had expected this situation. Humans are the most cowardly creatures. After being frightened last night, the nobles and wealthy businessmen were furious. Viscount Wright ran into everyone's guns and tried to block everyone's way to escape. Could this be successful? As expected, as Ufeli expected, the city gate was opened after only half a magic hour. Under the deterrence of the sacred giant wolf that deliberately exuded a certain aura, no one was blind enough to check Ufeli's carriage. In this way, with the 5 elves that caused all the riots last night hidden in the car, Ufeli left Wright City and drove towards the place where the Avis tribe was located. After 5 magic hours, under Nicole's guidance, Ufeli entered the Avis forest. It was inconvenient for the carriage to travel in the forest, so Ufeli simply gave up the carriage and walked towards the depths of the forest with the 5 elves. The liberated sacred giant wolf kept circling around Ufeli to vent his excitement that he finally didn't have to pull the carriage. Soon, Ufeli and other elves met the elves of the Avis tribe who came to greet them. Suddenly, pairs of elves in green clothes emerged from the originally quiet forest, and the leader was the great elder Avis whom Ufeli had met last night. When this middle-aged handsome man saw Ufeli and other elves, he actually resisted the urge to ask about his daughter's well-being first, but took the initiative to salute Ufeli first. Elder Allen, we meet again. Although I have thanked you last night, I want to say it again. I'm very grateful to Elder Allen for saving my daughter and the other 4 children. Ufeli would naturally not be rude, and also responded quickly. Great Elder Avis, your words are too formal. The elves in the world are one family. It is the duty of every elf to provide help to their compatriots in distress. You don't need to thank me so much. Haha. Are the elves in the world one family? Do the elves today still deserve this sentence? Hearing Ufeli's reply, the great elder Avis murmured, and his voice became smaller and smaller, and in the end it was barely audible. However, after all, Elder Avis was also a strong man of the sky level, with a strong consciousness. He quickly came to his senses and saluted Ufeli again. Elder Allen, please forgive me. I'm rude. My daughter was able to escape this time thanks to Elder Allen's help. I wonder if I can invite Elder Allen to visit the Avis tribe. Ufeli smiled lightly under his hood. Damn, I finally had the chance to say this. Every time I read a novel, I feel that this sentence is the most pretentious, right? Now it's finally my turn, right? I saw him slightly open his red lips. I really want it, but I dare not ask. Lovely dividing line. The Avis tribe is deep in the Avis forest. The elves all live on the big trees, and each of them lives in a tree house as a family unit or individually. However, some buildings in the tribe are still built on the open space between the forests, such as the reception hall of the tribe. On the way back to the tribe, Elder Avis and Nicole had communicated for a while. In this reception hall, young elves like Nicole are naturally not qualified to get involved at this moment. Accompanying Ufeli, in addition to the great elder Ivis, are the other 6 elders of the Ivis tribe. In today's elves, the symbolic significance of the queen is greater than the actual significance. The real power of each tribe is the elders council composed of the elf elders. It can be said that the 7 elf elders who are meeting with Ufeli in the reception hall can represent the entire Ivis tribe. Just after sitting down, a very beautiful female elder among the 6 elf elders stood up and bowed to Euphony, and Euphony could only stand up again helplessly. Red tape is the most annoying. Euphony muttered in his heart. Respected Elder Alan, thank you very much for saving the 5 young guys of my Ivus tribe. Didn't the great elder Rivus thank him again and again? Why did this female elder come again? Could it be that she is interested in me? The great elder Rivus next to him laughed and explained to Euphony. Elder Alan, Jenna, one of the 5 little guys you rescued, is a child of this elder Martha, so she came to thank you. Jenna? Oh, she's the most beautiful female elf who sold millions of gold coins. No wonder she's so beautiful. It turns out she has good genes. Looking at the beautiful elder Martha, Euphony thought so in his heart. Perhaps the fact that the Avus tribe was able to boldly send troops to threaten Right City last night despite the might of the Holy Lion Empire also has a part of the credit of this elder Martha, right? After all, a tribe is not a one-man show for the great elder, and the elders must discuss together to decide some major matters. Next, finally no elves thanked Euphony again. After sitting down one by one, Euphony started to communicate with several elf elders. After talking about his origins and the strength of the Avus tribe, Euphony also had some ideas about the next policy for the elves. At this time, the great elder Avus and several other elders looked at each other and spoke. Haha, Elder Alan, I didn't expect you to be from the Whispering Wind Forest. I've never heard of an elf tribe there before. Then, Elder Martha took over. Yes, it is said that monsters are rampant in the Whispering Wind Forest. Elder Alan is powerful, and I believe his tribe is the same. Naturally, they are not afraid of the monsters in the Whispering Wind Forest. But Elder Alan, there is something I don't understand, and I don't know whether I should tell you or not. Elder Elvis continued. Euphony pondered for a few seconds. You can tell me. My daughter said that Elder Alan seems to be very dissatisfied with the current situation of the elves. What does this now represent? The goal of the 4th update has been achieved. Please feel free to give me recommendations and rewards. Chapter 259 The Legend of the World Tree. Hearing this cultural remark from Elder Avis, Euphony wanted to slap his thigh hard. I've been waiting for you to say this. Elder, you are so cooperative. Of course, on the surface, Euphony still had to pretend to be calm. Euphony himself knew that these elf elders must have some guesses about his identity, and he had to show the demeanor of a peerless master at this time. This Euphony pretended to be silent, and did not speak for a long time. Elder Martha couldn't help it, and continued to ask Euphony. Elder Alan, we are both elves, what's wrong with saying it? Are you afraid that our Avus tribe will harm you? Elder Avis's face darkened when he heard this. Elder Martha, what are you talking about? Elder Alan is obviously organizing his words. How can he not want to say it? Don't talk nonsense. Elder Martha was not angry when she heard the reprimand from Elder Avis, but looked at him tacitly and then continued to stare at Euphony with a sharp gaze, waiting for him to speak. Oh my god, this performance of singing and responding to each other is really well done. Euphony watched the performance of the 2 elves in silence. Fortunately, Euphony was originally planning to make up an identity that the elves could believe in and rely on to get around or even absorb the elves, so after pretending for a while, he finally spoke. That's right, elders. I came all the way here from the Wind Whispering Forest, disguised as a human wandering wizard. What I saw made me very puzzled and even shocked. The elf tribe I belong to is called Dark Knight. Since I was a child, I have been taught that the elves are the noblest and greatest race in the world. Our Father God created the entire world, supported the operation of the entire world, and finally sacrificed himself for this world. In Eslays, there is also a legend of the World Tree. According to the legend, the World Tree evolved Eslays, and the rules for the operation of the entire world were formulated and maintained by the World Tree. The elves were born in the World Tree. However, 20,000 years ago, the demon world suddenly appeared and almost overlapped with the world of Eslays. Under the threat of powerful demons, the entire world of Esraz was in war and suffering. In order to save Esraz, the World Tree sacrificed itself, and with its boundless power, it separated the demon realm and the Esraz world, which had almost merged together, and destroyed most of the truly powerful demons. Only then did the world of Esraz settle down. However, although the world tree sacrificed itself to separate the demon realm and the SRAS world, which had almost merged into one, there were still some weak points in space between the demon realm and the SRAS world. As a result, there was an invasion of the demon realm every few thousand years. As for the moon god, that the elves now believe in, he was the guide of the elves created before the world tree sacrificed itself to save the world. However, after guiding the elves out of the depression, after losing the world tree, the moon god also disappeared. Because the elves truly felt the greatness of the world tree and the moon god, they were the only race with faith in the continent of SRAS. Like other human races, orcs, dwarves, including dragons, when the world tree existed, the elves only believed in power and had no faith. To be honest, when seeing these classics, Yufei was also very surprised and connected it to his own body in the moon temple. However, Yufei always knew that he was a time traveler, so he did not connect himself with the world tree and the world of Veslays. However, when communicating with the local elves, this might be a big killer. There were many thoughts in his mind, but Yufei did not stop talking. However, all the way from the wind whispering forest, what I saw was that the human race, which had hardly appeared in the knowledge I received, occupied a large area of land in Veslays, while our great elves were just lingering on. Yufei's words were a bit heavy, and the faces of several elf elders became a bit ugly. However, they also knew that, although it was a bit exaggerated to say that the elves were lingering on, it was not far off. The more powerful human forces are almost semi-openly capturing elves, and the smaller elf tribes are in danger all the time. The Elf King Court is almost a non-existent existence, which makes many elf tribes have almost no sense of belonging to the Elf King Court. For example, the elves of the Elvis tribe also asked about their views on the Elf King Court and the Elf Queen when Yufei and Nicole and other elves communicated. Judging from Nicole's reaction, although they still maintain respect for the two on the surface, Yufei can feel that in fact, they have no feelings for the Elf King Court in their hearts, and can even be said to be disdainful. Ignoring the ugly faces of several elf elders, Yufei continued to talk to himself. At the beginning, I was very angry about these situations. When I saw a noble who enslaved our elves, I even directly wiped out that family. But I found that I couldn't change the status quo with my own strength. So, I can only do what I can do, such as this time. Yufei stopped here. The emotions aroused by Yufei's words, several elf elders were silent for a while. After a moment, a male elf elder spoke up to break the dull atmosphere. Respected Elder Allen, we also know that the status of the elves today is completely different from that of thousands or even tens of thousands of years ago. This is not something we can change in a short time, not to mention the current Elf King's Court. Compared with the former Elf Empire, the current Elf King's Court is so weak. There are indeed elves who have such thoughts. Next, it's time to really make up stories. The Elf King's Court? Humph. When our Dark Knight tribe existed, how could the elves have a royal court? How could there be such a thing as an elf king? Yufei said shamelessly, completely ignoring the fact that the Dark Knight elves had only been in Veslays for less than a year. As soon as these words came out, the effect was immediate. When the 7 elf elders, including the great elder Avis, heard Yufei's domineering words, they all widened their eyes and stared at Yufei in disbelief. Haha, didn't the elders want to ask me before why I was sighing about the present elves? Now I will tell you why I say so. Yufei said this in a light tone. Chapter 260 Edit vigorously. Seeing the dull eyes of the elders, Yufei was full of pride. It was worth my brain cells to make up a story for the Night Elves. This time, I was able to stun these elven elders. It seems that there is a lot of potential in killing 2 birds with 1 stone. However, the lie was well done. Next, it is time to give full play to my talent for storytelling elders. Perhaps you don't understand why I said this? After I introduce the origin of my Night Elf tribe to you in detail, you will not be confused. Then, Elder Avis and the other 6 elven elders were fortunate to learn the secrets of the ancient times. It turned out that when the Great Father God World Tree sacrificed itself to split the demon world and S-Laser, another small world also overlapped with the S-Laser world for some reason. In this small world, like the demon world, there are many vicious monster races, but the scale is much smaller than that of the demon world. 20,000 years ago, the Night Elf tribe was the tribe closest to the Father God's world tree, so the Father God gave them a glorious and arduous task. After the Father God sacrificed himself to split the demon realm and Esraz, the respected moon god sent the Night Elf tribe into that small world according to the Father God's instructions, and then sealed the passage between the small world and the Esraz world. The mission of the Night Elf tribe is to defend the sealed passage, so that the Esraz continent, which has been ravaged by demons, will not be invaded by the monsters in this small world, and it is best to gradually eliminate the monsters in this small world. This defense lasted for a full 20,000 years. In the past 20,000 years, the Night Elf tribe has been fighting for the peace of the Esraz world in the small world. Finally, more than 20 years ago, the monsters in that small world were almost eliminated by the Night Elf tribe, who had passed down the mission from generation to generation. It was at this time, after 20,000 years, that the seal laid by the moon god gradually loosened and even disappeared. The monsters that suddenly appeared in the Whispering Wind Forest more than 20 years ago, which had never been seen in Esraz, were actually a small part of the monsters that escaped from the dilapidated small world after the seal disappeared. 20 years after the seal disappeared, the Night Elf tribe followed the order of the Father God and wiped out all the remaining monsters in the small world before stepping out of the small world. After stepping out of the small world, the Night Elf tribe appeared in the Whispering Wind Forest. Nowadays, the monsters that escaped from the small world in the Whispering Wind Forest have been wiped out by our tribe. So, I walked out of the Whispering Wind Forest to see what changes have taken place between the current world of Esraz and the Esraz described in our tribal books. What I didn't expect was that the elves, who can be said to have saved the entire Esraz, have now fallen to this extent. Our Night Elf tribe's 20,000 years of perseverance have been exchanged for such treatment of the elves by those lower races. Although Euphe's expression could not be seen, several elf elders could see the anger in Elder Alan's heart from his angry tone. As for this anger, several elders expressed their understanding. There was no way. When making up the above story, Euphe wrote about the glorious status of the elves in ancient times and the great contributions they made to Eslazer, and emphasized his dissatisfaction with the current status of the elves, which made several elders who were brought into the rhythm by Euphe feel the same way. After digesting Euphe's ancient secrets for a while, Elder Ives hesitated to take over the conversation. I didn't expect that there were such things in ancient times. Such a great contribution can be used to create a magnificent epic. Yes, I didn't expect that Elder Alan came from an ancient tribe that has been passed down from ancient times. No wonder he has a legendary strength. Elder Martha said enviously. A large part of the reason why the status of the elves is low now is that after 20,000 years of changes, the elves now are no longer the purebred elves that originally lived around the world tree. As the legend goes, each elf in ancient times had a lifespan of about 5,000 years, while the lifespan of the elves now is at most more than 1,000 years. This is the difference in bloodline. I'm the 5th generation of the Night Elf tribe. Most of the 4th generation elders have returned to the embrace of the Father God, so I'm fortunate to become an elder of the tribe. There are several elders in the tribe who are as powerful as me, or even stronger than me, not to mention the strength of the foreign races that have been recovered. Euphe responded to Elder Martha's words proudly. After making friends and proving his identity, he naturally had to show his strength a little. Euphe was not modest in this regard. Sure enough, after hearing Euphe's words, several elven elders seemed to be more in awe of him, instead of just being in awe of his legendary strength before. After secretly exchanging glances again, it was still Elder Ives who asked the question on behalf of several elders. Then, I wonder what Elder Alan thinks of the Elf King's court? It seemed that they cared about the answer to this question. After Elder Ives asked the question, several elders raised their already pointed ears even higher. Haha, the Elven Royal Court? I don't know when this so-called Royal Court appeared, but from the classics I read, since I was a child and the elders of the previous generation, I learned that there is no royal family among the elves. Every elf is a child of the Father God and a student of the Moon God. If we must divide the elves into different classes, we can only divide them by the depth of their faith in the Father God and the Moon God. With a sneer, Euphe clearly expressed his disdain for the Elven Royal Court. In my Night Elf tribe, we still have the real Moon Temple and Moon Priestess. I guess these have become legends among the elves today. Another depth charge blew up several elven elders. The real Moon Temple and Moon Priestess? The Great Moon God. Is this true? Yufei continued to belittle the elven royal court and highlight the Night Elves. During this period, I have also gained a general understanding of the current situation of the elves. The information I have obtained is that this so-called elven royal court has allowed our elves to be bullied by other races and has retreated to the south without any action. My Night Elf tribe has defended the continent of Eslays for 20,000 years, but in return the elves have suffered such treatment. After returning to the tribe, I must initiate an elders meeting to change the current situation of the elves, instead of just sitting there doing nothing like the elven royal court. Yufei's words were loud and clear. There was a problem with the network at home, so I ran to an internet cafe outside to post it. It's a bit late, please forgive me. Chapter 261 The Resurrected World Tree. Needless to say, Yufei's impassioned words naturally shocked the elf elders once again. However, this time, the elders' responses were not so quick, but they all looked thoughtful. Seeing this scene, Yufei's heart skipped a beat. Oops, I was in a hurry and said too much, and I revealed too much information in my words just now. These elf elders are not young people anymore. Although my previous words scared them, they still remained rational. Obviously, these elf elders saw some clues in my attitude towards the Elf King's court. Damn it, is it true that too much talk leads to mistakes? Yufei regretted revealing some of his attitudes too early. However, since the words have come to this point, it is better to go a step further. Looking at the elf elders who were thinking, Yufei made up his mind. Anyway, he still had a trump card that he hadn't used yet. The Abyss tribe was definitely going to belong to the Night Elves. If he could make a good start in the Abyss tribe, it would be much easier to act in other elf tribes next. That's right, Yufei has already prepared. In addition to developing the strength of the Night Elves themselves, he will also try to absorb the strength of the elves in Esraz. If some of the elven tribes can be conquered, there will be more than one benefit. First of all, although the status of the elves is not as good as before, it is mainly because of lack of unity, rather than lack of strength. If the Night Elves can obtain the recognition and obedience of most of the elven tribes, they will also become a very powerful force, allowing the Night Elves to conquer Esraz faster. Of course, this is not the main reason. Many things of the Night Elves, or to put it bluntly, many creatures including the main combat arms, are not native to Esraz. If they appear directly on the continent of Esraz and show a strong desire for aggression, it goes without saying that they will soon be in a state of being the enemy of the world. There is no other reason. Esraz has been invaded by creatures from other worlds before. Those races who know about the events in ancient times must be very sensitive to such things. If these native races put the Night Elves in a position similar to that of demons, it will be more troublesome. Fortunately, in this continent of Eslays, as in the settings of otherworldly novels, there are elves. In this way, after obtaining the support of some elven tribes, the Night Elves can act on the continent in the name of the elves. After all, people's attitudes towards foreign invaders and internal conflicts are completely different. This can be seen from the Chinese on Earth. Under the pretext of dissatisfaction with the current status of the elves, the invasion of the human world by the Night Elves has become a matter of course. There is no way to let the human nobles do too much to the elves. If a great noble does not have a few elven slaves at home, he would be embarrassed to hold a banquet. From this, we can see the attitude of humans towards the elves. After conquering some elven tribes, Yufei can hold the banner of anti-king and restoration of Ming. No, it is to restore the prosperity of the elves and invade the human world in an all-round way without receiving a backlash from the entire world of Eslays. In Eslays, the impression of humans by aliens is not very good. After achieving certain results, in addition to obtaining a large amount of energy, the Night Elves can be further developed, and more elven tribes can be attracted to serve. At that time, the heroic title of Yufei's avatar, Elf King, might become more than just a heroic title. As for the Elf King's court, Yufei never took it seriously. Yufei deeply despised a court that ignored the fate of its true compatriots in order to gain recognition from the human race. Yufei had already thought that after the Night Elves were recognized by the local elven tribes, they could confirm their claimed identity as ancient elves. In this way, the existence of creatures such as tree elves, mountain giants, and even the chimera that will appear in the future can also be explained. What? You said that you have never seen the existence of these strange creatures in the classics that have been passed down. What do you know? Can the classics clearly describe things that happened tens of thousands of years ago? We elves have recognized it ourselves, so why do you need to care? When other races in Slazer may question the origin of the Night Elves, the elves will undoubtedly be a good shield. Thinking of this, Yufei also had a preliminary plan for what to do next. Yufei also noticed the hesitation of Eldoravis. After all, it was still difficult for them to decide whether to surrender to other elf tribes. However, Yufei's legendary strength was a bargaining chip, and the real origin of the Night Elves, he told, was also a bargaining chip. The possible existence of the Moon Temple and the Moon Priestess was even a huge bargaining chip. Under Yufei's more explicit attitude, Eldoravis really began to consider it. Well, now is the time to put the last chip on it. Elders, there is one thing I haven't explained to you. This matter is related to the future of the entire elves. I hope you won't tell others. After listening to it, Yufei pretended to be determined and said to the elf elders. The elders cooperated very well, focusing their eyes on Yufei, waiting for him to continue speaking. It's like this. Before our Night Elf tribe entered that small world 20,000 years ago, the Father God who sacrificed himself to save the world of Esleys gave us the last seed he condensed. Now, what? Elder Allen, is this true? Yufei was interrupted by Elder Ives before he finished speaking. He and several other elf elders were extremely excited. They stood up from their seats and surrounded Yufei. They were no longer as calm as before, even when they were shocked. Yufei was also shocked by the fierce reaction of several elf elders, but soon began to deceive again. Yes, in a sense, now, the Father God has been resurrected in our Night Elf tribe. Boom. It was as if a thunder exploded in this small reception hall. The 7 elf elders turned into stone sculptures in an instant, and their bodies were shaking slightly, and their eyes were quickly flowing with various colors and emotions. There will be 3 updates today, so it will be a bit late. You can read it tomorrow morning. Chapter 262, The Elf Tribe. After a long time, the elves such as the Great Elder Rivus recovered from the state of near convulsion. Without saying much, just a moment of eye contact, several elf elders unified their attitude. This time, the tone of the Great Elder Rivus became extremely solemn. Elder Allen, I believe that with your status, you will never deceive us on such a big matter as the resurrection of the Father God. I have made it clear here that the Ivus tribe is willing to fully support the comeback of the Night Elves. Nice. This is the statement we want. The words of the Great Elder Rivus are very clear. If the resurrected body of the World Tree really exists among the Night Elves, the Ivus tribe is willing to wholeheartedly submit to the Night Elves. After all, Yufei is just a storyteller. He cannot understand what the World Tree means to the elves. In the eyes of the elves, the image of the World Tree Father God, which has been diluted by other races, has never been diluted. It is the Lord of creation of all things and the God of saving the world. The status he has is incomparable. If it is really confirmed that the Night Elves have the resurrected World Tree, a large part of the elves will take the initiative to obey the management of the Night Elves. It's nothing but respect for the tribe chosen by the Father God. In addition, I'm afraid every elf will want to go to the Wind Whispering Forest to worship Yufei's body. And now, there are 7 elves who want to do this. Respected Elder Allen, we have a small request. I hope you can agree. Elder Avis and the other 6 elf elders looked at Yufei with expectant eyes. Yufei roughly guessed the thoughts of several elders, so he readily agreed. As an elf who wants to worship the Father God, this reasonable request, on behalf of the Night Elves, of course I will not stop it. However, Yufei changed the subject and made other requests. However, I will not return now after this trip. I will also contact more elf tribes, have a deeper understanding of the current situation of our elves, and announce the existence of the Night Elves. Several elders expressed their understanding of Yufei's behavior, and only needed to take them with them when they returned to the Wind Whispering Forest with respect to Elder Allen. Great Elder Ivis, the reason why I can have such in-depth communication with the Ivis tribe is that I happened to rescue 5 elves from the noble tribe in Right City. The communication with other elf tribes may not be so smooth. After all, our Night Elf tribe has been immersed in that small world for more than 20,000 years. So I hope. Great Elder Ivis quickly understood Eupheni's words, thought about it, and after communicating with Elder Martha, he said to Eupheni, "Respected Elder Allen, how about this? Let Elder Martha go with you? My Ivis tribe is also a relatively large elf tribe. Letting Elder Martha go with you will play a big role in communicating with other tribes." Eupheni certainly would not object. This was his original idea. After obtaining the support of an elf tribe, the influence will be spread to other tribes through this tribe, so that the Night Elves can quickly obtain a legitimate identity on the surface. In more than half a month, the Night Elves will invade the human world in a big way. And Great Elder Ivis also has his own little thoughts. Although it was agreed with Eupheni, the matter of the father's resurrection was too important. Elder Ivis was afraid that Eupheni would forget the agreement with them and would not take them with him when he returned. Elder Martha followed Eupheni, which naturally solved this concern. Originally, Eupheni wanted to ask Elder Ivis to visit other elf tribes with him, but now Elder Ivis has already asked Elder Martha to go with him. Considering that the Ivis tribe really cannot do without the management of Elder Ivis, Eupheni did not raise any objections. After negotiating with several elders of the Ivis tribe, Eupheni did not stay for long. Time is precious. After accepting the formal thanks from several elves he rescued, Eupheni ignored the retention of many elves and took Elder Martha to another elf tribe in the southeast that had a close relationship with the Ivis tribe. Accompanied by Elder Martha, Eupheni's negotiations in this elf tribe, called Avril, were also very smooth. After presenting their fabricated origins of the Night Elves, the Moon Temple, the Moon Priestess, and the Resurrected World Tree, several elven elders of the Lavala tribe quickly chose to obey the Night Elves. Of course, the elders of the Lavala tribe also made the same request as the Great Elder Ivis, to worship Eupheni's body, which is what he called the Resurrected World Tree. Eupheni naturally agreed, but considering that, if the elders of every elven tribe had to worship, the number would be too large, Eupheni finally set the condition that only 2 elves could be in a tribe when he returned. The elders of the Lavala tribe agreed to this condition after consideration, and Elder Martha also accepted it under Eupheni's persuasion. After a good start, the next thing was easy to handle. In just 10 days, relying on the speed of the sacred giant wolf pulling the cart, Eupheni and Elder Martha had visited 8 elven tribes. At this time, the 8 elven tribes that usually had contact with the Ivis tribe all chose to obey the Night Elves. However, after that, there were no other elf tribes that had contact with the Ivis tribe, which also meant that Elder Martha's face was useless. After discussion, Eupheni invited another elder from the last elf tribe he visited to communicate smoothly with other elf tribes. 10 days later, relying on this relay method, Eupheni once again achieved results in the 7 elf tribes. Originally, he could continue, but another thing tied up Eupheni's mind, so he temporarily stopped visiting other elf tribes and shifted his attention to the other side. This matter must have been guessed by everyone. After conquering the principalities and states to the east of the Whispering Wind Forest, the Night Elves entered a period of recuperation and rapid development. The magic crystal ore and magic core that Eupheni ordered the Watcher Maeve to bring back were icing on the cake. The current Night Elves are more than 10 times stronger than the Night Elves who just stepped out of the Whispering Wind Forest. Eupheni was very confident that the current Night Elf army could easily crush the Kingdom of Severn, which was also a powerful kingdom in the entire human world. The Night Elves, who had made great progress, would naturally not be content to guard their existing territory and wait for the Kingdom of Severn to conquer the Lost Land. Chapter 263 Maeve's Assassination. That's right, now is the time for the Night Elves to show their fangs again. The number of Night Elves now exceeds 20,000. Because they have not fought many battles since they were trained, Night Elf archers and huntresses are only at the elite level, and the elite level is only the previous ones. Most of the soldiers that can only be trained at the level of the ancient tree, such as mountain giants and claw druids, are only at the ordinary level. compared with the units that have experienced the unification war of the Wind Whispering Forest, the conquest of the Northern Icefield, and the first invasion of the human world. Their strength is much worse. However, because of the sufficient energy, all Night Elf units are now equipped with enchanted equipment suitable for themselves by building many hunter halls. Although most of them are equipped with relatively low-level enchanted equipment, the improvement in strength is still unquestionable. Yufei temporarily returned his consciousness to his body. For such a major event as the full invasion of the human world, he still needs to give orders. In the eyes of many Night Elves, the father god who had been sleeping for a month finally opened his eyes again and ordered Tyrande in a low voice, "Tyrande, take my children to conquer more territories." After Tyrande responded in a low voice, she began to make arrangements in an orderly manner. Seeing Tyrande's various orders without panic, Yufei felt very relieved. This Tyrande finally looked like a real heroic unit. In the following years, Yufei decided to appear as little as possible in front of the Night Elves and the local elves who would come here later. After all, the gods need to maintain their mystery, and he only needs to communicate with a few heroic units. In addition, Yufei's Elf King clone will gradually come to the fore as a manager of the local elves. As a unit created by Yufei, he naturally would not worry about the loyalty of the Night Elves, so he could rest assured to hand it over to a few heroes for management. However, the trust in the local elves was obviously discounted, and Yufei decided to let his clone take control personally. Under Tyrande's arrangement, about 5,000 newly trained Night Elves stayed in the Whispering Wind Forest and the human countries that had been conquered before. One city and one horned griffin rider were obviously not enough to deter the humans who had lost their country. Although there was a puppet management class that was supported, the mobile force as a deterrent force was still necessary. Moreover, the loyalty of the humans who ostensibly submitted to the Night Elves to obtain management status was also questionable. In addition to the Night Elves who stayed behind, the others included the Night Elves who had participated in several wars before. Together with the vassal races conquered by the Night Elves, they formed an army of more than 20,000 units and began to pour into the Kingdom of Seven. Those conquered before were all weak human principalities or even states, so dividing the troops could achieve results faster. The Kingdom of Seven was one of the most powerful kingdoms in the human world besides the three major empires, and Tyrande's choice to fight in groups was extremely wise. With the Night Elves' far superior strength to the average human army, plus the number of 20,000, it was enough to crush one human army after another. If the troops were divided, it would be difficult for a small Night Elf army to escape after being surrounded by a large number of human troops. After all, the individual strength would be infinitely weakened in the war. Even 1,000 Night Elf warriors with various special abilities and average silver level strength would be wiped out when facing 50,000, 60,000 or even 100,000 human soldiers with average strength of trainees. As the vanguard of the Night Elves, Illidan led most of the highly mobile female hunters and hippogriff knights, and entered the border of the Kingdom of Seven first. His task was not to attack the city, but to clear the soft tissue between the hard bones in advance and cut off the passages between the cities, selected by the Night Elves as the attack targets and other places. The female hunters and hippogriff knights who came and went like the wind were enough for this task. Illidan led the troops assigned to him by Tyrande, bypassed the fortresses of the Kingdom of Seven and some cities behind it, and began to wreak havoc in those towns. At the same time, the main force of the Night Elves led by Tyrande also arrived at the fortress in the west of the Kingdom of Seven, outside the Brack Fortress. Marshal Cole, as the highest commander of the Brack Fortress, was very proud. It is said that the principalities and states to the west of Brack Fortress were beaten to a pulp by the resurgent Amazons recently, which gave the Kingdom of Seven an opportunity. Marshal Cole, a young and vigorous man, just learned the news a month ago and strongly requested 7/9 to send troops to quell the invasion of those small countries by foreign races. After all, only in war can the value of soldiers be reflected. However, under the opposition of those old ministers, 7/9 temporarily shelved this request. It was not until a month later that he summoned Marshal Cole for a secret talk. Then, Marshal Cole took 1/3 of the kingdom's army and stationed in Brack Fortress. These days, Marshal Cole woke up with laughter in his dreams. It turns out that His Majesty the King is not planning to start a war, but is preparing to continue to expand the territory in the name of repelling foreign races. In a few days, when the King's order arrives, I can send troops to the small countries in the west, become a hero in expanding the territory, and leave a heavy mark in the history of the Kingdom of Severn. Whenever thinking of this, Marshal Cole can't help but be grateful to the aliens who invaded the small human country. If it weren't for those aliens, how could I, Cole, have the opportunity to become famous? Thinking of this, Marshal Cole went up to the tower of the Black Fortress and looked westward at the vast land that he would conquer as the territory of the Kingdom of Severn. Standing on the tower, looking west, Cole seemed to see not the land, but his bright future. Huh? What is that? Marshal Cole suddenly saw a black line. The black line gradually advanced and showed a rough outline. With the strength of a cloud-level warrior, Cole saw the true face of the black line. Thick branches and green leaves, it turned out to be a big tree. Cole suddenly realized. It seems that the land of the small countries in the west is quite fertile. There are such tall trees and they have formed a forest. No. Cole suddenly reacted. How is it possible? Those giant trees are actually moving. The black line formed by the giant trees is getting closer and closer, and Cole has an ominous premonition. At this time, because of the strength, only Marshal Cole on the tower can see the true face of the black line. The other ordinary soldiers and the accompanying guards did not find it. No, although I don't know what the situation is, I must be alert quickly. Thinking of this, Marshal Cole was ready to ask the accompanying guards to notify the soldiers on the wall to enter the battle state. However, just when he waved his hand to call a guard over, he suddenly had a warning sign in his heart. At the same time, a cloud-level mage on the tower also shouted, "Marshal, be careful." Cole reacted very quickly, and when the warning sign just came up, he rolled forward like a lazy donkey. However, this evasive measure was in vain. A dagger emitting a faint green light and a creepy aura seemed to emerge from the void and fiercely penetrated Marshal Cole's back. The dagger was originally aimed at Marshal Cole's original position. It stands to reason that Marshal Cole's quick evasion should definitely avoid the dagger. However, the faint green dagger actually drew a curve in the middle and shot into Marshal Cole's body, who thought he had avoided the danger. This made everyone who saw this scene stunned. After the dagger penetrated Marshal Cole's back, his face quickly turned green, and he died within 2 seconds. Marshal Cole, who had the strength of the sky level, was killed by this dagger. Not far from the dead body of Marshal Cole, a figure wearing a black cloak suddenly appeared. It was not until then that Marshal Cole's guards reacted and rushed towards the figure, while shouting, "There is an assassin." However, the assassin who killed Marshal Cole in seconds didn't care about the many guards who rushed over. It seemed that he just turned around casually, and countless short darts flew around. In an instant, more than a dozen Marshal's guards fell to the ground. At this time, the mage who warned Marshal Cole also muttered a spell, aimed at the assassin, and prepared to release his spell. However, a faint light suddenly flashed on the target, and then disappeared. Just when the mage was upset about the assassin's escape, he found that his surroundings were shrouded in thick fog, and the prepared spell suddenly dissipated incredibly. This assassin was naturally Maiev*SHADOWSONG who returned to the Night Elves. In order to make the war go more smoothly, Tyrant did not let Maiev lead the army to fight. Maiev was not suitable for frontal combat. Like Illidan, Maiev was also given an important task, to assassinate the leaders of the army and city of the Kingdom of Severn. After Maiev sneaked into Black Fortress, by using permanent invisibility and blinking, she was still worried about where to find the leader. Unexpectedly, Marshal Cole appeared directly on the tower. Maiev would not be polite to this guy who wanted to die. With a shadow raid, Marshal Cole was killed instantly. Then the Marshal's guards were also cleared out by the sword array. Finally, facing the mage, Maiev used the mage's nightmare fog skill and easily solved it. After that, relying on blinking and permanent invisibility, Maiev easily left Black Fortress again, leaving behind the Seven Kingdom army in chaos due to the loss of its highest commander. However, they did not have much time to be confused. The main force of the Night Elves had already arrived into Black Fortress under the leadership of Tyrant. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. we cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 264, The Attack of the Giant Tree. Before his death, Marshal Cole, with his strength stronger than that of ordinary soldiers, discovered the black line formed by the Night Elf army in the distance. After Mayway killed all their human units on the tower and left the Brack Fortress, the soldiers on the wall also discovered the big trees that came in. Yes, in the eyes of the human soldiers on the wall, rows of neat and uniform big trees suddenly came from the west. Of course, now they don't know what kind of reputation these giant trees called Ancient Guardians will have in the future on the Slays continent. But anyone knows that these attacking giant trees cannot be used to green the Brack Fortress, so the alarm sounded quickly throughout the Brack Fortress. Afterwards, Brack Fortress fell into chaos. Just think about it, 1/3 of the army of the Kingdom of Seven is stationed in this Brack Fortress. In addition to the clear highest commander, Marshal Cole, the factions are relatively complicated. And these complex factions will naturally derive some seemingly insignificant contradictions under the suppression of Marshal Cole. Generally speaking, Marshal Cole's direct subordinates are considered a faction. The original garrison of the Black Fortress is considered a faction. The regular kingdom and army mobilized from other places is considered a faction. The largest and most chaotic faction is the private army sent by nobles from all over the country in response to the king's call. Most of these private armies are led by the descendants of the kingdom's nobles. Because this plan to march or conquer the small countries in the west does not seem to be dangerous, and it has the glory of expanding territory, all nobles who have the conditions send their proud descendants here to gild and fight for the interests of their families in the new territory of the kingdom. Of course, we also know that the children of nobles are generally arrogant except for those families that have been passed down for a long time. In addition to conflicts with the regular kingdom and army, the children of nobles often have frictions of varying sizes. This makes the Black Fortress very chaotic. It was okay when Marshal Cole was there, with his prestige and the orders of 7/9. As long as Marshal Cole issued an order, everyone in the Black Fortress would obey it. However, the problem now is that Marshal Cole has been assassinated by Mayev. More importantly, the news of Marshal Cole's assassination and the alarm of the soldiers on the city wall spread throughout the entire Brack Fortress. At this time, Brack Fortress was completely in chaos. Marshal Cole's direct subordinates were naturally angry, and all roared to hunt down the assassins who had sneaked into Brack Fortress. The original defenders of Brack Fortress were relatively calm, choosing to hold on to the fortress and wait and see what would happen. The other regular troops transferred from all over the kingdom did not riot for the time being under the orders of their respective leaders and chose to wait and see what would happen like the defenders of Brack Fortress. But because of Marshal Cole's death, a major problem was put on the table. Who should be the highest commander of Brack Fortress now? The leaders of the armies in various places had ideas. After all, this is 1/3 of the army of the Kingdom of Seven. If it is in your hands, to put it bluntly, it is enough to split the land and seal the borders. Moreover, the next thing to do is to conquer new lands, and as the highest commander, he will naturally get the greatest benefit. Therefore, the kingdom, which seems to be relatively peaceful, is also undercurrent. As for the private army, led by the nobles, they were originally a mob and they were in chaos when the news of Marshal Cole's assassination came, and the alarm sounded. Some of these nobles who came here for gilding were excited and shouted to the gatekeepers to open the door and rush out to fight in order to gain military merit. Some of them let the private army they led protect themselves firmly, fearing that the assassin who assassinated Marshal Cole would also come to trouble them. And a small part, under the joint attack of the two unfavorable news, was actually ready to flee from the Black Fortress to avoid possible dangers. These 7 or 8 different attitudes did not last long. Those who can lead the army are generally not fools. The soldiers guarding the city wall belong to different factions. Soon, the leaders of all sizes in the Black Fortress knew about the giant tree attacking in the distance and confirmed that it was news of a strong enemy invading. After that, a small number of timid nobles led their private armies to evacuate the Brack Fortress. The enemy who dared to attack the Brack Fortress must be powerful. Although they did not believe that the Brack Fortress would be captured, there would definitely be some dangers. A few nobles who thought they were delicate and noble obviously did not want to have any accidents in the Brack Fortress, so they left here. Indeed, their choice was actually wise. However, they did not know that, although they evacuated the Brack Fortress, they could only live longer than those who stayed in the Brack Fortress 600 meters away from the fortress. Those ancient guards, each of which was dozens of meters tall, stopped and took root in the ground. This temporarily relieved the defenders in the fortress. You know, the walls of the Brack Fortress are not as tall as these magical walking giant trees. If they bullied them directly, the Brack Fortress, which had not yet recovered from the chaos, would probably turn from a defense battle to an encounter battle. But then, looking at the enemies of various forms appearing behind the giant tree, the soldiers in the Brack Fortress all had an ominous premonition. Hundreds of stone giants more than 10 meters high, groups of knights wearing masks riding ferocious black panthers, a legion of monsters composed of huge dark brown giant bears and more golden leopards and blue giant wolves, knights flying in the sky riding strange birds and huge dark purple crows. Oh my god, what kind of enemy are we facing? Is this still the Amazon mentioned in the intelligence? The catapult in the Brack Fortress has a range of only about 500 meters, and it can't attack the enemies lined up at a distance of 600 meters. After seeing these seemingly very strong alien armies, those guys who clamored to open the gate to meet the enemy and earn military merits also shut up. So now, the huge Brack Fortress can only wait for the Night Elves to take the initiative to attack and try to calm the chaos in the fortress before that. 500 ancient guardians are the reason why Tyrann dared to choose to attack the Brack Fortress during the day. As early as 20 days ago, relying on sufficient energy and wood, the Night Elves built up to 1,000 ancient guardians. And more than 10 days ago, half of these ancient guardians that were originally rooted in the Whispering Wind Forest rose from the ground and moved towards the Kingdom of Seven under the command of Tyrann. These ancient guardians will become a siege weapon in the hands of the Night Elves. In addition to siege, these ancient guardians can also be regarded as movable walls with strong attack power. This means that in siege battles, the Night Elves can eliminate the enemy's advantage as the defender, and in field battles, the Night Elves can have the advantage of defending the city. A certain number of ancient guardians can be said to be a mobile city with countless turrets, although the movement speed is relatively slow. Moreover, some of these ancient guardians are transformed from ancient trees and have stronger combat power than ordinary ancient guardians. In addition to the ancient guardians who were mobilized in advance, Tyrann led more than 10,000 Night Elf units. Among them, there were as many as 800 mountain giants. Even without the ancient guardians, the walls of Brack Fortress would not be an obstacle to the Night Elves. 2,000 claw druids were trained in a month. However, except for the first and second batches of claw druids who could transform into earth bears, the other claw druids could only transform into lightning leopards and wind wolves. Raptor druids existed more as auxiliary units. Although they could transform into storm crows to fight as air units, the horned hippogriffs were enough to take the position of the Night Elves Air Force, so only 1,000 units were trained. As for the horned hippogriff knights, in order to form an air advantage, up to 5,000 units were trained. Compared with the elven dragons that specifically target mages, the horned hippogriff knights can already be called a legion. There is also the main combat unit of the Night Elves. The female hunters, who were highly mobile and heavily armored, had a total of 5,000, just like the hippogriff riders. The most basic type of archers of the Night Elves had a total of 8,000. Because the lower the rank of a type, the easier it was to advance. There were many lightning archers and wind archers among these archers. The Night Elves who stayed in the occupied areas and the part of the Night Elves who were taken by Illidan to go deep behind enemy lines to sabotage were deducted. Now Tyrann led 800 mountain giants, 1,500 claw druids, 500 raptor druids, 2,000 hippogriff riders, 300 elf dragons, 3,000 female hunters and 5,000 archers. In addition, Tyrann also led 100 bloodworms and some auxiliary units of the vassal races. Both of these were to reduce the losses of the Night Elves in the war. It is also worth mentioning that the air unit also had the purple dragon that had advanced to level 8 and mutated. Because Illidan went deep behind enemy lines, he led units with high mobility. She led a total of 2,000 hippogriff riders and 2,000 huntresses, as well as 200 elven dragons, to guard against human mages. The remaining archers and hippogriff riders, as well as a few mountain giants and druids, stayed in the occupied areas. After the units of the vassal races arrived, Tyrann took a deep breath, began to issue orders, and officially launched the attack on Brak Fortress. Chapter 265 Tyrann's Arrow. At this time, the Brak Fortress had gradually recovered from the chaos. Because no one wanted to let others take the supreme leader, the various forces in the fortress finally chose to fight together in the general direction and fight on their own in a small area. Just when they had just deployed their defenses, the Night Elves launched an offensive. In the eyes of the human soldiers guarding the city, the giant trees rooted in the ground suddenly raised their thick branches, and then a huge stone appeared between the two wooden arms. Without giving the soldiers on the city wall a chance to react, the 500 ancient guardians threw the boulders in their hands at the same time. For a moment, only the sound of the boulders swooshing breaking through the air was heard, and a huge black shadow flew towards the Brak Fortress. In an instant, a cry of crying for parents came from the city wall, and the army behind the city wall was confused. Are these enemies so terrifying? They actually scared the friendly troops on the city wall to tears? Afterwards, these soldiers quickly understood where the friendly troops on the city wall reacted from, and made the same reaction. Because the boulders thrown by the ancient guardians have already fallen on their heads. Only a few boulders were thrown onto the city wall, and after hitting the city wall, some of them rolled behind the city wall, and caused secondary damage. Most of the boulders fell directly into the Brak Fortress, forming bloody mocks, and then stopped in front of a wall or a collapsed house. In fact, strictly speaking, the casualties caused by these boulders are not very large. Although the boulders condensed by the ancient guardians are relatively large, one stone can kill more than 10 human soldiers at most, and 500 boulders have caused only 3,000 to 4,000 casualties in the Brak Fortress. 3,000 to 4,000. People seem to be a lot, but Brak Fortress now gathers 1/3 of the army of the Kingdom of Severn. Excluding the small number of noble private armies that evacuated before, there are still about 700,000 troops in Brak Fortress. This made Brak Fortress, known as the largest fortress in the Kingdom of Severn, very crowded some time ago, and it also became the cause of friction between soldiers. 3,000 or 4,000 is of course only a drizzle compared to 700,000, but the effect of these boulders is not to kill, but to create great psychological pressure on the army in the Brak Fortress. This feeling of not being able to fight back, and relying on luck, to avoid the boulders that may hit at any time is really terrible. However, just when the human soldiers were panicking, the second wave of boulders came. The ancient guard's bombing speed was certainly not so fast. This time the flying stones were projected by the mountain giants. After Euphena's body practiced Yuan Muzenju, the ancient wind tree also partially mutated. The mountain giants now have the ability to transform into a long-range form, turning into the legendary flesh-like catapult-like Cyclops. Although the boulders projected by the mountain giants are not as huge as those of the ancient guards, the number of mountain giants is 300 more than that of the ancient guards. So this time the shadow that came to the top of the human army was even larger, which made the soldiers even more panicked. Tyrann divided the ancient guardians and mountain giants into two groups, and took turns to launch heavy fire attacks on the Brak Fortress. Although the casualties on the human army were not many, the deterrent effect was very good. Moreover, Tyrann's purpose was not only to deter humans. In the almost uninterrupted attack of the boulders, the Brak Fortress, which had just stabilized, naturally fell into chaos again. The soldiers were in chaos, and in order to prevent mutiny, the leaders would naturally come out to maintain order. Baron Udi was a typical noble son who took this opportunity to gild himself. In order to protect the safety of his most valued son, his father, Count Udi, even sent the two most powerful gold level mages in the family and a warrior who had just advanced to the cloud level to Baron Udi as guards. In the attack of the boulders, Baron Udi did not receive any damage thanks to the magician's barrier and the protection of the cloud level warrior. However, the private army he led was frightened by the deadly stones that kept falling from the sky. As a last resort, Baron Udi had to stand on the roof to maintain order for the private army. With the barrier of the golden mage, he was not afraid that the boulder would crush him to death. However, just as he ordered his private army to find shelter to avoid the boulder and not to run around, an accident happened. An arrow emitting a silver-white light fell straight from the sky and attacked Baron Udi, who was making an impassioned speech. The speed of the silver arrow made even the cloud-level guards unable to react. It penetrated the barrier set up by the two golden mages, as if it was a piece of paper, and directly penetrated from the top of Baron Udi's head, and then blew him into pieces. Seeing this horrible scene, the private army, which had gradually calmed down under the comfort of Baron Udi and began to look for shelter, fell into greater chaos again. And like Baron Udi, every 10 seconds, a leader who dared to show up to maintain order would be directly killed by the silver arrow falling from the sky. No matter what strength or magic props this leader possessed, he could not escape the fate of being killed instantly by the silver arrow. After such incidents occurred several times, those leaders learned their lesson and dared not show up to maintain the order of the army and stop the chaos. This made the chaos in Brak Fortress more serious and soon developed to the point of mutiny. In the team of the Night Elves outside the city, Tyrande, riding on the back of a huge white tiger, opened the beautiful longbow in her hand and shot a silver arrow into the sky every 10 seconds. This is actually Tyrande's skill, the arrow of the moon with a long range to lock the target. Although those military leaders have learned their lesson and no longer show up to command, they have shown up before. During the war, Tyrande, who had the god's perspective given by Yuffie, still remembered the positions of those people and began to call them out one by one with the arrow of the moon to paralyze the command system of the human army in Brak Fortress. Maiev had previously made a move to directly assassinate the highest commander of Brak Fortress, so Tyrande naturally did not want to be left behind and showed off her exquisite archery skills. It was not until her magic points were almost consumed that Tyrande stopped this terrifying roll call and then activated the powerful attack aura, and the archers and the hippogriff knights who had already flown not far from Brak Fortress launched another long-range attack besides the boulder. Chapter 266. The Blade Thrower demonstrates its power. 5,000 Night Elf archers and 2,000 hippogriff knights who had already reached the upper part of Brak Fortress simultaneously poured their arrows into Brak Fortress. Because the current archers will directly reach the elite level after training, many elite archers who will be promoted to wind archers in the future have the skill of split shadow arrows, and the few wind archers have the more powerful scattered shadow shooting skill. Under the influence of the skill, although only 7,000 units launched the attack, the effect formed was truly 1,000 arrows fired at once. In an instant, more than 10,000 arrows were poured into Brak Fortress. The attack speed of archers and hippogriff knights is much faster than that of ancient guardians and mountain giants. This makes their attacks seem less terrifying than the boulders of ancient guardians and mountain giants, but the damage caused is higher than the boulders of these two. More importantly, the general archers do not consider the accuracy when covering the shooting, and just keep a roughly fixed position. Although it was overwhelming, the actual killing effect was not proportional to the number of arrows. However, the Night Elves were different. Because of the god's perspective, given by Yuffie, although there was a barrier of the city wall, the Night Elf archers were all carrying out precise strikes, and the archers riding on the horned eagles could directly lock their targets with good eyesight. Therefore, more than 10,000 arrows, whether physical or energy phantoms, really caused nearly 10,000 casualties in the Brak Fortress. Except for some of the stronger ones or those who happened to hide in the closed bunkers, more than 10,000 human soldiers targeted by the Night Elf archers and Horned Eagle Knights were shot. In this way, as long as the archers and Horned Eagle Knights attack for 60 or 70 rounds, the human soldiers in the Brak Fortress will die. Of course, this calculation is wrong. Apart from other things, the split shadow arrows and scattered shadow shooting both consume magic points, and as a type of soldiers, the archers actually have very little magic points and cannot withstand the consumption of continuous use of skills. However, it can also be seen from this how great the long-range advantage of the Night Elves is. The ultra-long range and accurate archery will make the Night Elves a nightmare for all enemies. In a field battle on flat ground, the Night Elves' good eyesight can aim at their targets freely without even providing a god's perspective, which makes the damage caused by the Night Elves' arrows completely different from that of other races. Under the attack of 10 rounds of arrow rain and the stone rain in between, the human army, which was already in chaos, and without the command of the superiors, finally collapsed completely. However, the remaining 600,000 or So human soldiers formed two different attitudes. More than half of the human army chose to open the gates of the Brack fortress and go out to fight this unknown enemy to the death. Most of these human troops were directly under Marshal Cole, regular kingdom troops mobilized from all over the kingdom of Severn, and the original garrison of Brack fortress. The remaining less than half of the human army was mostly private armies of nobles, and they naturally chose to escape. To be honest, the first thing that most of the noble children regretted now was why they came to this horrible place. The second thing they regretted was why they did not retreat with those noble children who evacuated first. Now they obviously forgot how they laughed at those witty Huantage and foresighted noble children when they evacuated. Under the shouting of various noble children, the human army consisting of about 250,000 noble private armies chose the opposite direction from the regular army that opened the city gates to prepare for the enemy and fled to the heartland of the kingdom of Severn. However, even the part of the army that retreated earlier was destined not to escape, let alone them. But now Tyrande had to face the part of the human army that bravely fought, so she put aside these deserters who had no courage and no threat at all. To be honest, the gate of Brack Fortress was still relatively spacious, but this was for the original defenders in Brack Fortress. In front of the more than 350,000 human troops who were eager to rush out of the fortress to fight the Night Elves, it seemed too narrow. In a hurry, some human soldiers pouring out of the city gate not only suffered another round of sword rain from the Night Elves, but also a small-scale stampede. Tyrande looked at the human soldiers pouring out of the city gate to fight in the distance with an indifferent face, and seemed not to think that these humans' choice was wise. Since you want to come out and experience the horror of our race, let us help you escape from this fortress. After whispering this, Tyrande waved the scepter that she replaced after putting down the bow and arrow, and the Night Elf team made a new move. In the gaps between the ancient guardians, who were still struggling to throw boulders, many seemingly wooden vehicles with mysterious patterns suddenly appeared. The humans in the distance were in chaos, and no one noticed the cold giant blades on these strange vehicles. However, after just a few seconds, the humans discovered this terrifying machine. Because this time, it was not just boulders that were thrown over, but also 200 siege giant blades thrown by the Night Elf blade throwers. The glaive throwers do not need to gain experience through battles to advance like other units of the Night Elves. After research and transformation by the Dwarf and Demon Slayer tribe that defected to the Night Elves, these glaive throwers have not reached the elite level, but they are all elite glaive throwers. This means that these glaive throwers can charge and project. 5 seconds of collective charging made the siege blades thrown by the 200 glaive throwers have an attack power of more than 10 stars. Although these giant blades are aimed at the walls of the Brack Fortress, it does not mean that they will not cause damage when they pass through the bodies of some unlucky human soldiers. Because of the angle and number, only a few siege giant blades attacked the walls after passing through the human army that had already left the city. However, the flesh and blood channels formed by these giant blades still made all the humans who saw this scene feel cold in their hearts. And after that, something even more terrifying happened. 200 giant blades designed specifically for buildings and huge rocks that also had a certain ability to destroy buildings simultaneously hit the walls of the Brack Fortress that claimed to never fall. The effect was naturally self-evident. Only the continuous boom 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 sound of the walls collapsing and the crackling sound of rubble could be heard. In the eyes of the human soldiers, the walls of the Brack Fortress fell under the power of the glaive throwers. Chapter 267, The Shock of the Mountain Giant. Not to mention the shock that the collapse of the walls of the Brack Fortress brought to the human soldiers. In a sense, the collapsed walls did allow the army inside the fortress to leave the fortress faster and fight against the Night Elf team. However, after discovering that the Night Elves could even break down the walls, and seeing the bloody tunnels scraped out by several siege giant blades in the human army, some human soldiers chose to retreat. However, this also allowed the human army that chose to resist to leave the fortress very quickly, carrying the rain of arrows and boulders that kept falling from the sky. 100,000 human troops gathered in front of the collapsed wall in just a few minutes. Some of the first human soldiers who came out had already rushed to a position close to the Night Elf formation 100 meters away, waving their weapons in a disorderly manner, and rushing towards the ancient guardians and the glaive throwers in between, obviously wanting to destroy the glaive throwers. Of course, the Night Elves would not let these mobs get close. After the human army rushed out of the Brack fortress, the archers in the rear shifted their targets from the city to the human soldiers who rushed out of the city. Swoosh, although it was only a distance of about 100 meters. For the charging human soldiers, this 100 meters was like a natural moat that they could not cross. As long as they rushed to a position about 100 meters away from the ancient guardians and the glaive throwers, there would be accurate arrows that took the lives of these ferocious human soldiers. There were 5,000 archers arranged in the rear of the Night Elves, and each of them was a sharpshooter who never missed a shot. It was obviously impossible for the human soldiers to advance in a row of 5,500, which made it possible for the Night Elf archers with extremely fast shooting speed and occasional skills to firmly control the human army's line of troops within 100 meters. But even so, the archers of the human army and some accompanying mages were able to attack the glaive throwers and the ancient guardians. However, their attack could not form a scale, because the team was too chaotic and there was no unified commander. This makes the ancient guardians, who have extremely high durability and become city armor units after taking root, not afraid of these attacks at all. You know, the damage of city armor to piercing attacks and magic attacks such as bows and arrows is reduced to 1/4. Coupled with the already high armor value, the ancient guardians can indeed be competent for the task of serving as city walls after taking root. However, the glaive throwers are not as tough as the ancient guardians. After several glaive throwers were accidentally damaged by the messy long-range attacks of the human troops, Tyrande withdrew the glaive throwers from the front to the back. After all, the walls of the Brack fortress have been destroyed by the glaive throwers, and the glaive throwers are not particularly effective against the army. I'm afraid that they will not be used in the subsequent battles. As more and more soldiers poured out of the Brack fortress through the collapsed walls, the archers gradually couldn't stop the human troops who were madly attacking the Night Elf formation. At this time, Tyrande's eyes were cold, and she ordered the mountain giants and claw druids to walk out of the bushes formed by the ancient guardians and stand in front. The 800 mountain giants stopped gathering boulders to throw, and they all grabbed the giant sticks stuck on the ground beside them and walked forward to meet the human troops. Mountain giants originally had no weapons. Even if they were transformed into siege units by pulling up trees, an ordinary tree would only be enough for the mountain giants to attack about 10 times before it would be damaged. However, this is naturally not a problem in front of the Hunter's Hall. After the mutation, the Hunter's Hall can even exchange for things like the exclusive equipment of heroes, so how could it not exchange for the equipment of the mountain giants' troops? The giant sticks held in the hands of the mountain giants now are naturally the equipment exchanged from the Hunter's Hall. Thick Earth Giant Stick increases attack power by 1 star and increases the melee attack range. Because it condenses the power of the earth element, it is not easy to be damaged and is limited to giant creatures. Although this thick earth club does not have fire or other attribute attacks like the enchanted moonblade of the female hunter, just the 2 points of increasing attack power and being not easily damaged are enough for the mountain giants to use. The thick earth club does not increase the attack power of the mountain giants too much, but this equipment can also make the attack range of the mountain giants with shorter arms a little farther, which can be said to have greatly improved the combat effectiveness of the mountain giants, so that they are no longer just a meat shield and siege unit. Behind the mountain giants, there are more claw druids who have transformed into earth bears, lightning leopards or wind wolves. Although the two magic beasts, lightning leopards and wind wolves, are better at magic attacks, as magic beasts, their melee strength is still slightly better than that of humans of the same level, and they are fully capable of serving as melee troops. As for the reaction of the human troops, they were naturally stunned. Although some human soldiers have observed mountain giants on the city wall, they are obviously not tall enough compared to the ancient guardians, and because of the distance, not many people pay too much attention to these stone giants who are considered to be long-range troops. But now these stone giants, who were considered to be ranged units, were charging forward with their creepy-looking giant sticks, obviously wanting to have a close-up encounter with the human soldiers. hiss when the brave and fearless human soldiers who were at the front, and who were lucky enough not to be shot to death by the archers, saw the stone giants, which were more than 10 meters tall, walking towards them at a speed that seemed slow, but was actually not slow. Because of their large steps, they all turned around and ran away without hesitation. The difference between watching from a distance and getting in close contact is too big. We are naturally fearless when facing an enemy that we can fight, but how can we fight when facing a wall that is walking towards us? Exclamation mark. The shocking effect of watching from a distance is naturally far different from the effect of observing from a close distance. In the eyes of the human soldiers who were rushing in front, the mountain giants were just thick stone walls wielding deadly weapons and walking towards them. Look at that terrible giant stick. I'm afraid that a light sweep will sweep us into a pool of meat paste like sweeping ants with a broom. Of course, they are not afraid of fighting, but no one is willing to go forward in a battle destined to die, and not everyone is a death squad. However, the human soldiers in the front wanted to flee back, but the human troops rushing up from the back could not turn around for a while. Although everyone saw the terrifying mountain giants and deeply felt the horror of these stone giants, it is not so easy to adjust a team of hundreds of thousands of people. More importantly, there is no leader who can speak in this army of hundreds of thousands of people. Even some officers with slightly higher status were eliminated in Tyrant's sniper before. The current situation is that orders are often not unified, let alone conveyed and executed. A small officer who originally only commanded a few hundred people may now gather thousands of soldiers. It is of course extremely difficult to issue orders, not to mention that some soldiers who were not under their jurisdiction did not listen to their orders at all. At this time, the lightning shooters who advanced to snipers among the Night Elf archers added fuel to the fire. The wind shooters are developing towards group battles, and they can be imagined as machine guns, while the lightning shooters are similar to snipers. Although they are not as powerful as Tyrant's lunar arrows, which can even hit powerful upper level officers with one arrow, they are more than enough to deal with some weak lower level officers. Under the purposeful sniping of these lightning shooters, the command system of the human army became more chaotic. Looking at the hundreds of thousands of human soldiers surging in several different directions, you sighed. Tyrant's decapitation tactics were really successful. Originally, when the human army faced an army like the Night Elves that had strong individual strength but insufficient numbers, it had to rely on huge numbers and strict formations to win. But Tyrant first asked Maiev to assassinate Marshal Cole, and then took advantage of the chaos caused by the ancient guardians and mountain giants throwing boulders to find out the upper level commanders of other human armies, and named them one by one. Not only did it scare away nearly half of the human army, reducing the pressure on the Night Elves, but it also made it impossible for these human soldiers who tried to fight to the death to be effectively commanded. Originally, if the large number of archers and the accompanying mage group in the human army were gathered, it would still be possible to cause considerable damage to the Night Elves, but without a commander who could gather all the archer troops, who could command those proud mages, it seems that even the elven dragons are useless this time, and those mages have played no role at all. This is also good. It can leave a trump card for the Night Elves and give the human mage group the surprise in the future. The mountain giants took big steps and quickly rushed into the team of human soldiers who turned around and fled, ignoring those human soldiers who turned around and fought again. When they saw that there was no hope of escape, the mountain giants either stepped on them or bent down and swept the ground with thick earth sticks, starting an easy killing. As for the sporadic attacks of the soldiers and some archers and mages in the distance, they could not cause any effective damage under the mountain giants' resistant skin and high armor. It was a waste of talent to use the mountain giants to fight these short human soldiers. The movement of 800 mountain giants alone had knocked down countless weak soldiers, not to mention the trampling of their big feet and the rolling crushing of their giant sticks. The monsters transformed by the claw druids behind the mountain giants saw that the mountain giants had performed well in the task of blocking the advancing human troops, and they leisurely released magic behind the mountain giants one by one. Chapter 268 Entering the Black Fortress. Compared to human magicians, it is much easier for Warcraft to cast magic. Although magicians can choose more magic than Warcraft, fewer magic means specialization. Warcraft casts magic instantly. Only a few magicians can do this. such as most chaos mages. In just a blink of an eye, the human team was overwhelmed by the magic released by various Warcraft transformed by the claw druids. The earth bear controlled the earth element to erect stone spears from the ground, piercing the enemy's intestines and stomachs. The lightning leopard released jumping lightning, causing countless human soldiers to twitch and fall down. And falling in this army, even if you are not electrocuted, you will be trampled to death. The largest number is the windwolf transformed by the ordinary claw druid. Because the ordinary magic value is less and there is no large-scale killing magic, the windwolves are directly involved in close combat. Anyway, under the deterrence of the mountain giants, those human armies rarely muster the courage to fight back. Even if some soldiers who still had blood in their veins launched a counterattack against the mountain giants, the sharp swords could not even cut off some stone chips from the mountain giants. In addition, the mountain giants would first trample or sweep these little guys who dared to resist with thick earth sticks, and soon no one would make any futile moves. It may be a bit exaggerated, but ordinary human soldiers are just ordinary people who are relatively strong. Even if the regular army of the Kingdom of Seven has the strength of trainee level warriors, they still cannot cause any harm to the mountain giants, whose defense is comparable to that of the Scar level strongmen. Some people may be confused when they see this. Isn't it said that it is difficult for the strong to make a difference in the army? This is true. An ordinary human Scar level strongman can be easily killed when surrounded by tens of thousands of troops, but there are as many as 800 mountain giants here. What's more, can mountain giants be compared with humans? The size alone was enough to make the human army despair. In addition, the hardened skin and resistant skin skills that were specifically designed for the numerous enemies with low strength made the mountain giants' achievements in large-scale combat very outstanding. After the thick earth giant stick strengthened their attack power, the Night Elves could proudly declare that the 800 mountain giants were a legion of 800 peak cloud level warriors. Hundreds of claw druids transformed into windwolves traveled through the stone forest formed by the mountain giants, spitting out wind blades, or waving their claws to kill those fish that leaked the sticks from time to time, and followed the mountain giants to advance towards the collapsed walls of the Black Fortress. Under the obstruction of the flesh and blood line of human soldiers, even the mountain giants who were marching forward took 10 minutes to walk the 500 meters, and arrived in front of the destroyed walls of the Black Fortress. Behind them were human soldiers with different deaths. Some were electrocuted into charcoal, some were pierced into candide horse by stone spears, some were trampled or swept into mincemeat, and some were cut into two ends by wind blades. The various miserable deaths were enough to make people vomit up their overpass meals. However, Yufei didn't feel anything when he saw these. After all, he had been a tree for a while, and his humanity had become much more indifferent. In addition, these were not Earthlings, but just a group of aliens from another world. Even though the actions of the Night Elves were close to massacre, Yufei still had no reaction. As for where the trees would vomit, if they wanted to. Besides, corpses were also a kind of fertilizer. Compared with the human soldiers killed by mountain giants and claw druids, those shot to death by Night Elf archers and hippogriff knights were actually lucky. The Night Elves' superb archery skills made the enemies shot by them die with one arrow, and their death was much better than that of other soldiers, and they would not suffer more torture. If Black Fortress had not collapsed before, it would only take a few swings of the giant sticks by the mountain giants, but it would still take some effort. Now that the city wall has been broken down by the glaive throwers, it is just a matter of stepping over it for the tall mountain giants. When the mountain giants and claw druids who led the way entered Black Fortress, Tyrann gave an order, and the other Night Elves also started to move forward. However, the ancient guardians were left behind because of their slow movement and huge size, which easily disrupted the formation. They would be commanded to move to a new position only after Black Fortress was completely captured. The huntresses naturally walked in front. Agile and heavily armored, they were the best candidates to clean up the remaining human soldiers who were not completely eliminated. Their sharp eyes allowed them to easily find hidden enemies. The Black Panthers under their crotches allowed them to easily chase those small groups of soldiers who fled in other directions. As for the battle, the female hunters with the skills of ejection and explosive moon blades would naturally not be afraid of these weaklings. One female hunter was enough to wipe out a small group of human troops, not to mention that there were now 2,000 female hunters pulling nets to clean up. After letting the female hunters clean up the battlefield first, Tyrande and the subsequent archers, raptor druids and other teams also slowly headed towards the ruined Brack Fortress. However, at this time, a riot broke out in Brack Fortress. When the mountain giants and claw druids entered Brack Fortress, there were still more than 100,000 human troops ready to rush out of the fortress and fight the Night Elves to the death, as well as more soldiers who wanted to evacuate Brack Fortress. Because the gate facing the Kingdom of Seven was designed to be relatively narrow, although half a magic hour had passed, only some of the noble private armies that were originally stationed near the gate withdrew in time. After the mountain giants and claw druids entered Brack Fortress, the people who counterattacked found that it was futile and joined the fleeing team. However, the already narrow city gate was crowded with so many people that no army could withdraw. Coupled with the fear caused by the mountain giants and claw druids entering the city, the human soldiers who wanted to escape became even more confused, so that the city gate was completely blocked. Soon, some timid nobles saw that there was no hope of escape, and the huge and terrifying enemies behind them were approaching, so they shouted to surrender and put down their weapons. They had no choice. They couldn't escape, and the giants who caused the ground to shake when they walked didn't seem to care that their movements would kill people. What else could they do if they didn't surrender? As nobles who have been living in a greenhouse and come here to gild themselves, they think their lives are extremely precious and naturally don't want to die in this Brack Fortress. Although surrendering will make you have an indecent reputation for cowardice, it is much better than losing your life, right? What's more, aren't there more noble children here to carry it together? They all surrendered, so who would laugh at whom? With the idea of saving their lives and redeeming themselves after surrendering. After several noble children took the lead in surrendering, almost all noble children immediately chose to lead their private army to surrender. The mountain giants and claw druids obviously did not have the authority to agree to their surrender, and facing the surrendered enemies, they obviously could not step over and chase the fleeing enemies without scruples. The mountain giants and claw druids stopped there for a while. Through the god's perspective, given by Yuffie, Tyrande quickly discovered what happened in the fortress. After a little thought, she responded. She gently patted the white tiger under her seat, and the white tiger understood and made a stunning jump, directly crossing a distance of several hundred meters, and landing in the Brack Fortress. Jump. The Mount of the Moon Priestess jumps forward, and she is invincible during the jump. The roar of the mount, after landing, forms an aura, which increases the attack speed and movement speed of friendly units. Although the jump skill was only increased by 1 level, it was still relatively easy to cross the distance of 500 or 600 meters. Therefore, in the eyes of the people in the fortress, a beautiful woman sitting on a white tiger appeared. When many noble children saw Tyrande's beautiful face, although they knew that this might be an extremely terrifying enemy, they still showed a pig-like look. However, Tyrande's reaction was extremely fast. With a cold look in her eyes, she quickly took down the longbow behind her and shot out an arrow with a flashing silver light. A noble child with the most indecent posture was directly shot in the head. Seeing this familiar scene, everyone's heart was cold. So those attacks that fell from the sky and killed people with arrows were the attacks of this goddess-like enemy. All the people who looked at Tyrande quickly lowered their heads in fear, not daring to look at them again. But the people who lowered their heads had extremely complicated feelings. Unlike the mountain giants and the claw druids who transformed into monsters, Tyrande could be easily recognized as an elf. Although the appearance of the Night Elves and the native elves is different, ordinary humans obviously cannot tell the difference. Everyone believes that the enemy who attacked the Brack Fortress is the elves. Are the elves going to go to war with humans? The Elf King's court must not have the courage and strength to do so. For a while, some people of some status were full of doubts. After Tyrande showed her strength, the strong men in the crowd, who were originally ready to take advantage of the elf who was likely to be the enemy's leader to appear here and seize the opportunity to sneak attack and implement the decapitation tactic, also quietly stopped their actions. Tyrande naturally noticed the behavior of these people, but she was too lazy to waste her energy on these guys who posed no threat at all, so she didn't care. The goddess-like elf gently opened her lips in front of a group of humans who were lying on the ground to surrender. Chapter 269 Accepting Captives. Are you going to surrender to the great Night Elves? A cold voice came out, and all the humans who heard the voice were intoxicated for a moment, but they soon sobered up. Now their lives are in their hands. Several noble children who first prostrated themselves to the mountain giants and claw druids stood up at this time. After all, when facing those stone giants and monsters, it is obvious that they cannot communicate, and they can only express their surrender by lying on the ground. And now the elf who looks like the enemy leader is obviously willing to communicate with them, so naturally no one is willing to lie on the ground. After several leading nobles exchanged glances, they answered Tyrann's question. This respected elven lady, we are nobles, and now we formally choose to surrender to you and your powerful subordinates. According to the war law on the continent, we hope to be treated fairly until we are redeemed. A noble said on behalf of the others. Normally, these pampered nobles would not be so polite, but the enemy that appeared this time was too powerful, which completely crushed their pride. Moreover, the provisions of the war decree that treat nobles well and allow redemption are usually only observed between human countries. Facing this fierce night elf tribe that they have never heard of, these nobles are really afraid that they will not abide by this decree. However, Tyrann's response later made them feel relieved. The night elves accept your surrender. However, what you have to do now is to put down your weapons and get out of the way as quickly as possible. Otherwise we will not care about you guys who were enemies half a magic hour ago in order to chase other humans. Without hesitation, everyone put down their worries and quickly got out of the way under the fierce arrogance of the monsters transformed by the mountain giants and claw druids. The mountain giants, claw druids, and the extremely fast female hunters all followed the cleared road to chase those humans who were still crowded around the city gate or had already escaped from the Brack fortress. Before these ground pursuit teams, the Horned Eagle Knights led by Tyrant had already chased up from the air and were constantly pouring arrows on the fleeing human soldiers. After most of the enemies in Brack fortress chose to surrender and a small number of rebels were wiped out, the ancient guardians standing outside the city also pulled up their tree roots and slowly walked towards Brack fortress. What is amazing is that each ancient guardian carries 10 night elf archers. 500 ancient guardians just carry 5,000 night elf archers. This is Euphena's idea. Archers are relatively fragile and mainly rely on long range attacks. Although they are all equipped with enchanted equipment exchanged from the hunter hall, the elite archers trained have at least the strength of entering the silver level, but in close combat, they may not even beat bronze level warriors. This is also the characteristic of the Night Elves, or the characteristics of various races in the Warcraft game. Although each type of soldier has certain shortcomings, its advantages have been infinitely expanded. When you can attack with confidence, the damage caused by the Night Elf archers is unparalleled, and soldiers like mountain giants, whose attack capabilities are not particularly significant, have attributes that make the enemy despair in terms of vitality and defense. They can ensure that the powerful long-range units of the Night Elves in the rear can output as much as possible. If they fight alone, the Night Elf soldiers may not be able to beat the strong men of the same level in the Slays continent, but if they are combined to form an army, the Night Elves are absolutely invincible. Besides, these soldiers were born for war, so why do they need single-player ability? If it's a single player, aren't there hero units and those special soldier heads? Speaking of soldier heads, Euphene was a little confused and depressed. After the previous series of battles, soldier heads like Avril and Luna had already reached the elite level with full experience. Compared with the general elite level soldiers of the same type, these soldiers have a much stronger number of skills and skill power, so their overall strength is naturally far superior to other similar soldiers trained later. However, these soldiers are not as good as hero units, and there is no room for advancement. Although Avril's strength has been improved to a certain extent by combining with the hippogriff to become a hippogriff knight, this is only an exception. In fact, there is no room for the soldiers to improve their strength. 8 words can describe their current situation: not as good as the best, but better than the worst. Is there really no way to improve the strength of these soldiers? There are too few elves in the position of commander in the Night Elves. There are only Tyrant, Illidan, Maiev and Eupheni's Elf King clone in the hero. Among them, Maiev is not suitable for commanding the army, and Eupheni's clone has been wandering outside. Therefore, the managers of the Night Elves are very insufficient. Even now, a large part of the Night Elves are mobilized by Eupheni himself with his mind. Tyrant does not have the ability of Eupheni. Although she can be given the ability of mental manipulation by Eupheni in a small range, it is impossible for her to command the growing army of the Night Elves alone, or with Illidan later. Therefore, Eupheni must find a new manager. As a soldier leader who is different from the general army, it is naturally the best choice. However, although the strength of these soldier leaders is already relatively strong, they may not be able to compete with the strong among humans. Eupheni must think of a way to improve the strength of the new manager in his mind. Soon, Eupheni thought of the information about soul crystals that Avril told him when he first came to the continent of Slays and only had Avril, an elf with high intelligence. Combining what Avril said at the time and the things in the inherited memory he got, the soul crystal is something that can be obtained by killing creatures with relatively high intelligence and strong strength. And this kind of thing is likely to allow the soldier leaders to advance again. In memory, legendary intelligent creatures can be condensed into lower level soul crystals after being killed, and epic and mythical levels correspond to intermediate and upper level soul crystals. I just don't know what level of soul crystal can allow the military leaders to advance. While thinking about this, Tyrant's Horned Eagle Knights have successfully relied on their air superiority and arrows that harvested countless lives to make those human troops who have escaped from the Brack Fortress, but ultimately have no hope of escaping the pursuit of the Night Elves, kneel down and surrender. And Tyrant, who came later, also gladly accepted their surrender. Originally, according to Eupheni's intention, the human army must be destroyed, otherwise it will become an unstable factor in the rear of the Night Elves. In the previous war against the small countries in the west of the Kingdom of Seven, the Night Elves did implement this oracle. Now the Night Elves can attack the Kingdom of Seven with confidence. In addition to leaving behind 5,000 newly trained Night Elf units, it is because there are almost no clusters of armed element in the conquered lands. Of course, mercenaries and adventurers are still allowed to exist. This time, Eupheni did not expect to be able to kill or capture 1/3 of the army of the Kingdom of Seven at one time. Originally, he was going to destroy 1/3 of the power of the Severn Kingdom, but when he learned that more than half of these troops were private armies of nobles, Eupheni had a new idea about the whole situation. The first thing to determine is that the Night Elves cannot go to war with the forces of the Slays continent in a short period of time. After a period of development and even after Eupheni's body advances to the level of the Eternal Tree, he can consider directly pushing it all the way, but the Night Elves obviously do not have such strength now. Considering this, it is necessary to give the forces of the Slays continent a feeling that the Night Elves will not pose too much threat. So Eupheni thought of accepting the surrender of those noble children and allowing them to redeem themselves according to the practice of the Slays continent. In this way, before conquering the Severn Kingdom, the Night Elves can get a large amount of property that can be converted into energy and directly convert it into combat power to conquer the Severn Kingdom more easily. And this is not the key. The Severn Kingdom will eventually be completely occupied by the Night Elves, and those properties will not be able to escape Eupheni's palm sooner or later. Eupheni wanted to spread a message to the mainland through this incident. The Night Elves were not the kind of unruly beings, but they followed the rules of the game. Slayer could not tolerate a race that did not follow the rules and caused chaos and killing everywhere, but he could accept an extra player in this game. What's more, the Night Elves also had the cover of the native elves. In this way, although the Night Elves were an existence that did not follow the rules after all, they could create a false impression in a short period of time so that the Night Elves would not be the enemy of the world. After accepting the surrender of the nobles and other soldiers, all humans were taken back to the Brack Fortress for guarding. At this time, the Brack Fortress had been turned into a tree city by 500 ancient guardians. The Night Elf archer standing on the ancient guardians reminded the captives not to think of escaping. And the human captives were indeed very obedient. They had run so far before, and were caught by the Horned Eagle Knight and the female hunter who followed. Now they were under people's noses, so they could not even think of escaping. It would be better to wait for the kingdom to redeem him. Many noble children were sighing that those guys who fled when the alarm sounded in the city when Marshal Cole was assassinated were the first to have good sense, and now they are the only ones who have managed to escape. Chapter 270 Secondary Soul Crystal. The captured nobles were sighing at the luck of those who escaped early, but they didn't know what the human troops who had escaped from Brack Fortress were facing at this time. There were at least hundreds of thousands of troops facing less than 20,000 Night Elves, while those who escaped were about 20,000 troops facing more than 4,000 Night Elves led by the powerful hero Illidan, consisting of 2,000 Horned Beast Knights, 2,000 Huntresses and 300 Raptor Druids. At the beginning, because the Huntresses and Horned Beast Knights were not as terrifying as the monster troops transformed by the Mountain Giants and Claw Druids, the human troops who escaped chose to rush forward when facing the Night Elf troops blocking the road. However, they soon regretted it. The rain of arrows from the Horned Beast Knights in the air and the explosive flying blades thrown by the knights riding Black Panthers and wearing masks on the ground all caused great damage to the human troops of only 20,000. When the noble guards were ready to gather together for a surprise attack under the order of their master, the Raptor Druid released the skill of Elven Fire on the guards, who were quite strong. In an instant, the aggressive guards felt that the fighting spirit they exuded seemed to be much softer, and the arrows and moon blades that could have been blocked and defended by them, after being cast with the skill of Elven Fire, were all unable to defend. An ordinary stray arrow, a quietly exploding moon blade, both brought fatal damage to these guards, who were not afraid of the attacks of the Night Elves under the protection of fighting spirit or strong flesh. It didn't take long for the last hope of the fleeing nobles to fall on the way of charging. The troops that escaped from the Brack Fortress did not have hundreds of thousands of soldiers like those in the Brack Fortress. Just a short output of the Night Elves led by Illidan reduced the number of these 20,000 soldiers by nearly half. Seeing that the situation was not good, the leading nobles wisely chose to surrender and no longer resist. However, Illidan and Tyrande are different. As a relatively violent hero, the demon hunter will not show mercy to his enemies. After leaving the Night Elf team, Illidan came alone to the remaining more than 10,000 human soldiers. A noble who represented these soldiers came out with a face full of fear and said to Illidan the surrender words similar to those said by the nobles who surrendered in the Brack Fortress and Tyrande. However, Illidan's reaction was to look at him coldly and then activate the demon transformation. 1 minute later, the Night Elf troops evacuated from this place, and the place where the human soldiers were originally located was left with only some human remains that Illidan deliberately left. You can also vaguely see some black auras that have not yet completely dissipated. Illidan directly used the domain attached to the demon transformation to eliminate or devour the more than 10,000 human soldiers. Only a hero with special skills like Illidan can do this kind of thing of fighting 1 against 10,000. If we change to a native strongman of Esley's with the same epic strength, although he may gradually eat away the army of more than 10,000 with his strong strength, it will definitely not be as easy as Illidan. This is also the difference between the heroes of the Night Elves and the native heroes of Esley's. They have the ability to truly change the situation of the war, rather than the so-called decapitation tactics or gradual cannibalization. For example, the domain attached to Illidan's demon transformation, Maev's Vengeance God skill that can summon countless vengeful souls, are enough to change the situation of a large-scale battle. As for Tyrande's falling stars, which can be said to have reached the strategic level, it is not to mention. Illidan directly eliminated these surrendered human troops this time, although there was his violent side, but more because of Eupheni's order. Eupheni had no concerns about the Kingdom of Severn. To show a gesture to the forces on the continent, the captured nobles in the Brack Fortress were enough. As for the Kingdom of Severn, it was natural to use these escaped nobles to kill the chickens and scare the monkeys. 2 messages can be conveyed to the Kingdom of Severn, which is why Illidan can leave the remains behind. Otherwise, relying on the demonic aura, he can devour all the humans without leaving anything. First, these completely killed troops can serve as a warning to the nobles in the Kingdom of Severn, so that they can pay the ransom to redeem their proud offspring. Secondly, it can give some fence sitters a terrible impression of the Night Elves. In this way, in the subsequent attacks, the number of weak guys who choose to surrender will definitely increase. Yufei can directly promote these nobles or officials of the Kingdom of Seven who have certain management capabilities to manage the Kingdom of Seven for the Night Elves. Yufei is still very relieved about the weak bones who surrender. Loyalty does not need to be considered, as long as they can collect magic cores and magic crystals for the Night Elves. Even if they are not loyal enough, they are destined to not make any waves under the huge gap in strength. After killing this batch of troops that escaped from the Brack Fortress, Illidan continued to wreak havoc in the western territory of the Kingdom of Seven. Because when the Brack Fortress was gathering its forces, most of the troops in the western territories closest to the fortress were recruited to the Brack Fortress, and this land could not form an effective resistance to the troops led by Illidan. At the same time, in the Brack Fortress, Yufei's consciousness was attracted by several mysterious fluctuations. Although Yufei's god consciousness could not spread such a long distance from the wind-whispering forest to the Brack Fortress, with the help of the units of the Night Elves, Yufei could still radiate his consciousness here. Just now, Yufei suddenly found several unknown fluctuations in the Brack Fortress. Soon, relying on his powerful mental power, and using some small methods of searching for items in the Yuanmu Zenju, Yufei found something that was emitting fluctuations. What is this? Looking at the 5 small objects that seemed to be smashed crystals that appeared in the range of consciousness, Yufei was a little confused. However, soon, through the exploration of mental power and the search in the inherited memory, Yufei found information about these seemingly incomplete crystals. The 5 crystals appeared on the bodies of 5 sky level masters. Although there were more than 5 human sky level masters gathered in the Black Fortress, some of them chose to surrender. Although there were more than 5 sky level masters killed, there were indeed only these 5 crystals. By comparing with the information in the inherited memory, Yufei determined that these 5 crystals were actually secondary soul crystals. In addition to the 3 types of soul crystals, killing sky level masters with higher intelligence may also explode soul crystals, but they are secondary. Unlike the rule of 3x3 for the 3 types of soul crystals, 4 secondary soul crystals can be combined into a lower level one. This means that Yufei already has a lower level soul crystal in his hand that may allow the soldier to advance. After getting this soul crystal for the first time, Yufei also found more information about soul crystals from the inherited memory. This information made Yufei ecstatic. It turns out that soul crystals can indeed allow the soldier leaders who are already at a bottleneck to improve their strength again. This kind of improvement is not advancement, but transformation of them into hero units. That's right, every soldier has the possibility of being transformed into a hero unit. As for the different levels of soul crystals, they limit the maximum level that the transformed heroes can be upgraded to. The heroes transformed from lower level soul crystals can be upgraded to level 4, the intermediate ones to level 7, and the heroes transformed from upper level soul crystals are no different from the heroes summoned from the altar and can be upgraded to level 10. Of course, it does not mean that heroes transformed from lower level and intermediate soul crystals can only be limited to level 4 and level 7 forever. For example, if Yufei fuses a middle level soul crystal with a hero that can only be upgraded to level 4 through the transformation of lower level soul crystals, her level cap can be raised to level 7. So, it is more cost effective to directly transform with upper level soul crystals, which can save a lower level and an intermediate soul crystal. Yufei thought thoughtfully. However, the upper level soul crystal is too difficult to obtain, so Yufei plans to combine 4 secondary soul crystals into a lower level soul crystal, transform it into a hero unit, and see the effect. If the effect is good, it is possible that the strong Menabes laser will wither for an era. A huge tree that blocked out the sun suddenly opened its eyes, revealing a fierce look. Because the synthesis of soul crystals and the transformation of heroes can only be done by Yufei himself. After thinking about it, Yufei ordered Avril to rush back to the wind-whispering forest with 5 secondary soul crystals. First, Avril, who became the first Horned Eagle Knight, is now the fastest unit of the Night Elves except for the Purple Dragon. Second, Yufei is also ready to use the first transformation quota on this girl who followed him the earliest. At the same time, Yufei also gave up the idea of asking Tyran to order the Night Elves to search for secondary soul crystals. This kind of thing can only be discovered by Euphenia's spiritual consciousness, and I'm afraid that there are only 5 soul crystals formed in this battle, so there is no need to waste time. On Avril's way back to the wind whispering forest, Euphenia also thought about why no soul crystals appeared when attacking those small countries before, and soon understood it. There were not many strong men in those small countries, and only a few were killed by the Night Elves. The secondary soul crystals, that only have a certain probability of forming, would not appear so easily. Most of the sky level strong men and the only 2 legendary strong men fled, because the Night Elves were much weaker than they are now, so naturally they did not give Euphenia the opportunity to obtain the soul crystals. There will be another chapter later, and 3 chapters today. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 271, The Response of the Kingdom of Severn. Shaking his head in his heart, Euphenia stopped dwelling on the past. If the effect of the soul crystal is really confirmed this time, the main goal of the Night Elves in the future, in addition to searching for the components of the Heart of Eternity and obtaining energy, will be to obtain the soul crystal. With so many intelligent races in SLAs, there are definitely enough soldiers to transform into hero units. Avril's speed is second only to the purple dragon. It took less than 1 magic hour to rush back to the wind whispering forest from the Brack Fortress. If it weren't for the fact that it was not a particularly urgent matter, and Brack Fortress also needed Tyrion to guard it, Euphenia was ready to let Tyrion take Avril back with the scroll of returning to the city. Speaking of purple dragons, the Night Elves did not let purple dragons participate in the previous battle. Speaking of purple dragons, they are already at the peak of level 8, and can be comparable to the epic level strongmen among humans. But in the previous battles, 1 more purple dragon or 1 less purple dragon would not have any impact on the battle situation. Considering that it is not appropriate to provoke the dragon clan now, Euphenia did not let the purple dragon appear in front of humans. A large part of these humans will be redeemed, but they must not be allowed to obtain and spread the information about the purple dragon. It is not difficult to call the secondary soul crystals lower soul crystals. Swallowing 4 secondary soul crystals into the body space will automatically synthesize the lower soul crystals. And the next thing is to fuse this crystal clear lower soul crystal with Avril. How to fuse it? Euphenia was suddenly dumbfounded. Let Avril swallow it directly? Maybe it is feasible, but now Avril is already a hippogriff knight. But will there be any problems if she transforms the hippogriff herself? To put it another way, even if Avril transforms into a hero as an archer, what about Luna? Can the huntress still be called a huntress without the Black Panther? However, Euphenia soon got the specific method of fusing soul crystals and the inherited memory that he jokingly called the Encyclopedia of the Night Elves. It turns out that the Elder's Altar is still needed to transform the soldier head into a hero unit. After thoroughly understanding the method of transformation, Euphenia's mind moved, and Avril and her partner, who had already come to the Elder's Altar, turned the first trained horned eagle into a light and shadow, and was included in the Elder's Altar. Then, Euphenia also put the lower level soul crystal into the Elder's Altar, and then the Elder's Altar suddenly burst into a strong light. After the light stabilized, the altar was flowing with green light and shadow, and entered the working state. The transformation process takes 24 hours, and all Euphenia can do now is to wait quietly. Euphenia already has a guess about the hero template that Avril has transformed into, but there may be some differences in skills. However, this is all 24 hours later, and the focus is still on the Kingdom of Severn. Although it is the productivity level of feudal society, because of the existence of magic, there are many things on the SLA's continent that are far beyond the feudal society stage. For example, in terms of communication, generally speaking, it is only necessary to rush to transmit information. Although some domesticated monsters may be faster, they still have limitations. However, when the function of magic transmission was developed, all this changed. Although the cost is high, almost all capable forces will choose instant magic communication for some extremely important matters. when Illidan led nearly 5,000 Night Elves to wreak havoc in the western territory of the Kingdom of Severn, some lords who found something wrong used domesticated beasts to pass the news to the capital. However, before the news reached the capital, some frightened nobles could not wait to pass the latest news to the capital. These frightened nobles naturally discovered the situation of Brack Fortress. Although Illidan blocked most of the enemies escaping from Brack Fortress, there were still some guys who did not follow the main force and managed to escape the pursuit and interception of the Night Elves. There were also several cases of nobles abandoning the army early and letting the powerful guards take them away. After these nobles escaped, they entered the nearest city, and the lords in the city naturally accepted them. After exchanging identities and information, the lords who knew the current situation of Brack Fortress were naturally shocked. They ignored the materials and funds consumed by magic communication and quickly sent the news that Brack Fortress had been captured by the enemy suspected to be elves to the royal capital. At first, the wizards in the magic tower in the royal capital who received the magic communication thought that some nobles were joking. 1/3 of the kingdom's army, plus a strong city like Brack Fortress, would be defeated. It's a joke. But after several lords sent the news one after another, the wizards in the magic tower were shocked. Could it be true? Exclamation mark. Whether it is true or not, it must be let your majesty know quickly. Under the high efficiency operation, Severn Ninth quickly got this seemingly joking battle situation. In the royal study of the palace, Severn Ninth and the ministers who were quickly summoned all looked unbelievable. After a long time, Severn Ninth slowly spoke. My 700,000 troops are gone just like that. The ministers were shocked and bent down at the same time. Your Highness, we are terrified. Severn Ninth laughed bitterly. You are terrified? I'm terrified too. This is definitely not done by the Amazons. That small alien race definitely does not have the strength to do this. The message said suspected elves, and we cannot even believe it completely. Everyone knows the current situation of the elves. After a moment of silence, the old Prime Minister stepped forward to comfort Severn Ninth. Your Majesty, there are 700,000 troops, including many nobles. I'm afraid that those unknown enemies will not risk the world's condemnation to kill them all. At most, half of them will be lost. At least the nobles should be safe. After that, the old Prime Minister sighed and said, my grandson is also in the Black Fortress. After that, he retreated to the queue of ministers. Severn Ninth listened to the old Prime Minister's words quietly, tapping his fingers on the desk, and slowly said, my dear ministers, I'm afraid that all of you have children who have fallen into the hands of the enemy in the Black Fortress. It seems that we can't treat this unknown enemy toughly for the time being. First, we must redeem the captured nobles first, and second, we must find out the details of the unknown enemy. However, the mobilization of domestic troops must be carried out immediately. The 700,000 strong army was defeated overnight. I have to say that this enemy is too terrifying. After saying that, Severn Ninth looked at the ministers with a meaningful look. My dear ministers, the country is in crisis. Shouldn't you contribute your strength? Hearing what Severn Ninth said, the ministers below felt a little uncomfortable. Indeed, each minister has some more or less hidden power in his hands, which are generally powerful retainers summoned. As a protection of the family, they are rarely used. But now that Severn Ninth has pointed it out and made his request, and almost all of their descendants have been captured while guilding in the Brack Fortress, they all obeyed Severn Ninth's order. There is no impenetrable wall in the world. As a powerful kingdom, there must be many spies from other countries in the country. Almost at the same time as Severn Ninth held the meeting, according to the importance of the intelligence, the news that the Brack Fortress was captured by an unknown enemy and the 700,000 troops of the Severn Kingdom were killed or captured, was quickly transmitted through magic communication. The Severn Kingdom responded quickly. In order to save time, Severn Ninth did not send diplomats from the capital to negotiate with the Night Elves, but directly appointed the Duke of Webster, the largest noble in the western part of the kingdom, as the temporary foreign minister, to negotiate with the mysterious enemy who occupied the Brack Fortress. Duke Webster did not dare to neglect it. First, the pressure from the capital was great. Second, his most beloved grandson also wanted to achieve some achievements in the team that were supposed to make contributions to the expansion of territory. The Duke was also very anxious after hearing the news. At this time, Illidan also stopped his sabotage in the western part of the Kingdom of Severn. Duke Webster quickly contacted Illidan's group who had deliberately shown up, and under Illidan's guidance, he rushed to the Brack Fortress. On the way, Illidan deliberately led Duke Webster's diplomatic team past the place, where he had killed more than 10,000 human soldiers alone. Just a glance from a distance, Duke Webster and the people in the team almost vomited, and then looked at those beautiful elves and Illidan with fear. More than 10,000 tattered corpses that seemed to have been tortured to death were placed together in broad daylight for exhibition is not something that everyone can see. But those who really see it will definitely regret seeing this scene. The Night Elf troops led by Illidan are very fast, and the diplomatic team led by Duke Webster is also strong and fast, and can barely keep up with the speed of the Night Elves. 10 magic hours later, the team came to Brack Fortress from Webster City, which was not particularly far from Brack Fortress. There were many human corpses on the ground facing the interior of the Kingdom of Severn and the Brack Fortress. Although these corpses were really handled, and not too scary compared to the corpses that Illidan had handled before, the huge number still made everyone pale. After entering the Brack Fortress, Duke Webster's face eased a little, because he saw that the captured nobles were gathered together and were not abused. He even found his grandson in the crowd, but on the surface he remained calm. Duke Webster's grandson also saw his grandfather, but as a duke's most beloved grandson, he did not lose his composure under the duke's frustrated eyes. Both grandfather and grandson thought that their performance had not been discovered by the Night Elves, but Illidan, who had been following Duke Webster, how could he not notice their little movements? But he was just too lazy to pay attention to them. Soon, he would see Tyrande again after a long absence. Chapter 272, The Uncompromising Night Elves. It didn't take long for Illidan to come to Tyrande with Duke Webster. The demon hunter, who was originally full of dominance, was a little overwhelmed after seeing Tyrande. However, Tyrande ignored him and talked to Duke Webster. While Tyrande and Duke Webster were discussing the redemption of the nobles captured by the Night Elves, Illidan's current vehicle, the dark magic tiger, came to the white tiger lying on the side to rest. Euphony, who was paying attention to the negotiation scene at this time, was very speechless when he saw this scene. If this dark magic tiger really seduced Tyrande's white tiger, what kind of offspring would it give birth to in the future? Panda tiger? Because according to Euphony's meaning, those captured nobles were originally used to ask for ransom, and Tyrande also implemented Euphony's instructions. Therefore, in the negotiation of redeeming those noble children and private armies, Tyrande and Duke Webster quickly reached a consensus. However, the two sides disagreed on the issue of redeeming the captured regular soldiers of the kingdom. The price given by the Duke of Webster to redeem the nobles was very high, but the redemption price of those regular soldiers was incredibly low. In fact, this is also an unwritten rule on the continent, or within the human race. When the two sides are at war, the redemption price of the captured nobles is generally very high. In addition to the fact that a noble has a private army under his command, the most important reason is that the money for redeeming the noble does not need to be paid by the country. If a noble child is captured by the enemy in the war, then the redemption of his property must be paid by his family, and the country is only responsible for negotiations. If an exchange agreement cannot be reached, then the family has given up the noble child, and it has nothing to do with the country. The army is different. The army directly under the country usually flees or is killed, and there are rarely hundreds of thousands of prisoners like this time. Therefore, under normal circumstances, captured ordinary soldiers are rarely redeemed by their country. This time, it was because the number of the captured regular army of the kingdom was about 300,000 that Severn asked Duke Webster to redeem the soldiers. If this part of the army was lost, it would not be a serious loss, but it would be a huge loss. However, Tyrande was extremely dissatisfied with the price Duke Webster proposed to redeem the soldiers. There was no other reason. Compared with the price of redeeming the nobles, it was too far. Even if the price of the nobles' ransom was divided by the number of their private armies, the price would be much higher than the price given by the Kingdom of Severn to redeem the soldiers. Duke Webster had no choice on this point. The ransom of the nobles did not need to be borne by the kingdom, but these armies were different. No noble would pay for the kingdom, and the number of 300,000 was too large. If the redemption price was slightly higher, the Kingdom of Seven could not afford it. The Night Elves certainly would not understand the difficulties of the Kingdom of Seven. Although it seemed that they were negotiating peacefully now, in fact, both sides knew that they would never give up after this. The goal of the Night Elves to capture the Kingdom of Seven is unquestionable, and the Kingdom of Seven will naturally rise up in resistance. Until the end, the two sides did not reach an agreement on the issue of redeeming the soldiers. Illidan on the side suddenly sneered, "Since you think these humans are only worth this much, then there is no need to redeem them. After releasing these soldiers, you will still use them to fight us. The great Night Elves will not do such a thing of shooting themselves in the foot." After saying this coldly, before Duke Webster could think carefully about what he meant by this, Illidan turned around and walked out of the temporary negotiation hall, and then there was a commotion outside. Tyrande was also startled by Illidan's sudden interruption. Illidan rarely spoke so long in such a tone in front of her. She was about to go out to check what Illidan was doing, but the father's divine thoughts suddenly arrived. After concentrating for a moment, Tyrande was stunned for a moment, then calmed down and gave up the idea of going out to check the situation. But Duke Webster couldn't help but walk out of the negotiation hall and observe the situation in the Brack Fortress. At this time, the gate of the Brack Fortress facing the territory of the Kingdom of Seven was already open, and countless soldiers of the kingdom were queuing to walk out. What is this situation? Duke Webster turned his eyes to the followers waiting outside the hall. The followers were also very sensible and quickly explained to Duke Webster what had happened before. It turned out that after Illidan walked out of the negotiation hall, he directly opened the city gate. Then he announced that the regular army of the kingdom would leave the city, and the nobles would stay here temporarily and wait for the ransom to arrive before being released. In addition to the soldiers' surprise shouts that they were released by the Night Elves, there were also protests from the nobles. These followers and the Seven Kingdom soldiers who were released from the Brack Fortress felt the same, thinking that the Night Elves had let them go. Duke Webster was also stunned when he heard this. Could it be that, because the conditions given were too low, the Night Elves didn't care about that little thing and directly released these 300,000 soldiers? No, absolutely not. Judging from the previous negotiations, these Night Elves are definitely not fools. After releasing these soldiers, they will still be organized by the Kingdom of Seven to fight against the Night Elves. The words of the terrifying elf who brought him all the way to the Brack Fortress also showed that the Night Elves did recognize this. So what does the behavior of the Night Elves now mean? Judging from the more than 10,000 unsightly corpses and the corpses of the human soldiers outside the Brack Fortress, the Night Elves are definitely not kind people. They will definitely not let go of these 300,000 potential, confirmed enemies easily. Combined with the words of the terrifying male Night Elf, Duke Webster suddenly had an ominous premonition. As more and more human soldiers left the Brack Fortress, the inexplicable sense of depression in Duke Webster's heart became heavier. Inadvertently changing his sight, Duke Webster saw a group of horned eagle knights taking off. With a start in his heart, he looked elsewhere. The female hunters were also gathering at this time, and the Night Elf archers walked down from the ancient guardians and climbed up to the undestroyed wall of the Brack Fortress facing the interior of the Kingdom of Seven. No. Duke Webster had an idea in his mind that he could not believe. After the last wave of regular troops of the kingdom left the Brack Fortress according to their own organization, the actions of the Night Elves also made the terrible idea in Duke Webster's heart become a reality. The Night Elf archers who climbed the tower opened their enchanted longbows expressionlessly, and some archers also used skills such as shadow arrows and scattered shadow shooting. At the same time, the female hunter troops also followed the human soldiers who thought they were safe out of the Brack Fortress through the gate that was not closed. The Horned Eagle Knights took off early and were now above the human soldiers who had left the Brack Fortress. The human soldiers at the back had already discovered the Night Elves following behind them, and more soldiers discovered the Elf Knights riding strange birds in the air, who had caused them a loss of 100,000 before. This is not letting us go? What are these Night Elves going to do? Without giving the human soldiers a chance to think, the rain of arrows from the wall behind them quickly woke them up. Under the threat of the female hunters who were chasing them and throwing moonblades and the horned eagle knights who were shooting in the air, these human soldiers who had long been frightened by the terrifying night elf troops and lost their courage to fight began to run away. Duke Webster, who hurried to the city gate, closed his eyes in pain. Although the relationship between the nobles and the royal family in every country is not as harmonious as imagined, the power of the kingdom has suffered such a loss. As a great noble of the kingdom, Duke Webster is also unwilling to see it. While Duke Webster rushed to the city gate, Tyrande quietly walked out of the negotiation hall, organized her own moon god guard, and activated the Legion skill to link the female hunter troops and the 100 bloodworm souls brought to the Brack Fortress together. Before, the mountain giants and claw druids did not use bloodworms as backup to defeat the enemy. Although the female hunters have become heavy armored units, the human troops may suffer some losses in desperation. Now the bloodworms and the female hunters who rushed to the front share vitality to ensure their safety. However, although Tyrande made such a foolproof preparation, she did not use it at all. Under the attack of the Night Elves, whose number was only a few tenth of their own, the human troops who were driven out of Brack Fortress all chose to flee, and almost no troops turned back to fight back. In the previous battle, they had been completely shattered. Maybe turning back to fight back and kill some female hunters, but if we wait for those stone giants and monsters to go out, we will definitely die more miserably. Almost all the human soldiers who were fleeing had such thoughts. However, their speed was far inferior to that of the female hunters riding black panthers and the horned hippogriff knights in the air. Although they escaped from the range of the night elf archers on the city wall with their huge numbers, which reduced the death rate a lot, many of the hundreds of thousands of human troops had already fallen outside Brack Fortress. Gradually, with the relentless pursuit of the huntresses and the hippogriff riders, the corpses of the human soldiers were spread from the Brack Fortress to the outside of the nearest city to the Librick Fortress. I recommend a novel, Valoran of Valoran, which is about the League of Legends. Chapter 273, Corpses Everywhere. This day was later called the initial declaration day of the Night Elves. On this day, only a few thousand of the 300,000 regular troops of the Kingdom of Seven escaped to the city closest to the Brack Fortress. All the other soldiers fell forever on the road from the Brack Fortress to this city. A full 300,000 corpses formed a bloody road that extended from the Brack Fortress. The dead air condensed by countless undead even made some scavengers dare not approach. It will not be long before this artificial Feng Shui treasure land will attract many necromancers. However, if the necromancers really dare to appear in the land of the Night Elves will not be polite to these guys who play with corpses. Corpses are everywhere. Really, corpses are everywhere. Duke Webster, who walked out of the Brack Fortress as if he had lost his soul, looked at the endless sea of corpses extending to the distance and murmured. It was not until the female hunters and the horned hippogriff riders who had gone out of the city to carry out the extermination returned to the Brack Fortress that Duke Webster woke up with a start. Then he suddenly rushed into the negotiation hall and stood in front of Tyrande with anger. You are slaughtering the captives. You will be despised by everyone. Priest Tyrande, weren't we still discussing before? How could you do such a horrifying thing? Duke Webster was excited and shouted at Tyrande. However, the next second, he could not shout anymore. A strong hand like an eagle's claw grabbed Duke Webster's collar and lifted him up. This was naturally Illidan's hand. Duke Webster looked at the strong elf in front of him who lifted him up with difficulty breathing, and his throat gurgled, and he couldn't speak. This Duke Webster was really unlucky. It was fine if he questioned the behavior of the Night Elves, but he dared to yell at Tyrande. Perhaps Tyrande, though indifferent, would still talk to him calmly, but Illidan was here, and anyone who dared to disrespect Tyrande would naturally not find a good result. Duke Webster looked at the guy who was grabbing his collar with an angry look, and tried to break free with his teeth and claws. But he soon found that it was futile. His murderous eyes met the black cloth wrapped around Illidan's eyes, and there was really no way. In the end, it was Tyrande who rescued him. After a flat tone of Illidan, put him down. Illidan snorted coldly, put down the nearly suffocated Duke Webster, and turned to walk out of the negotiation hall. Tyrande's flat voice rang out to Duke Webster, who fell to the ground and gasped for breath. Duke of the human race, you can see that it was not me who ordered the killing of those human soldiers. I'm a priest, and Illidan is the highest military commander of our Night Elves. He ordered the killing of those humans, and I have no right or obligation to stop him. Then, Tyrann's tone turned cold. Moreover, I don't think Illidan did anything wrong. Since you are unwilling to redeem those humans, it is our business to deal with them. Don't think of ourselves from the ancient times as the cowardly so-called elven court now. Duke Webster noticed the word ancient, but his attention was obviously not on it now. Nothing wrong? Do you know what you did? 300,000. You slaughtered 300,000 captives. This will be condemned by everyone in Esraz. However, Illidan turned back at this time. Prisoners? Haha, we didn't see any prisoners. We only saw 300,000 deserters who disobeyed orders and escaped from the prisoner camp. I guess there is nothing wrong with killing the escaped prisoners. You clearly said you would let them go, and we all saw it. Duke Webster got stuck halfway through. Everyone. There are only some of his followers and nobles of the Kingdom of Severn here, representing the position of the Kingdom of Severn. Who else would believe the slander of the Kingdom of Severn against the enemy? Even if 300,000 prisoners did die, but both sides have their own opinions. You say they were prisoners and he says they were not. Outsiders are too lazy to distinguish or care. As if he suddenly aged a lot, Duke Webster's tone became weak. But, after killing so many prisoners, don't you have any remorse in your heart? Looking at Illidan, who was like a demon in his eyes, Duke Webster asked. Before Illidan could answer, Tyrann spoke first. Let me tell you about this question. I have said before that we are high elves inherited from the ancient times. Don't compare us with the degenerated elves now. 300,000 people. 20,000 years ago, your ancestors were able to survive thanks to the grace of us ancient elves. 20,000 years, 300,000 people can be traced back to the beginning, and probably only reproduced from a few people. From your perspective, we killed 300,000 humans, but from our perspective, we only killed a few people. There is just a difference in time. Tyrann's tone when she explained this was not cold, but Duke Webster felt a bone-chilling chill. So indifferent, so disdainful, so in the eyes of these ancient elves, humans are just a kind of low-level creatures. The ancient times they mentioned before can be as old as 20,000 years ago. Duke Webster stood up silently and walked out of the negotiation hall dejectedly. The ransom of the nobles has been negotiated, and the ransom of the kingdom's soldiers. There is no one to be ransomed now. Then, there is no need to stay here anymore. After routinely comforting the captured nobles and asking them to wait for their families to redeem them, Duke Webster said goodbye to Tyrann. After that, after handing over the property he brought with him, Duke Webster took his beloved grandson and his private army away. After that, there will be a steady stream of magic cores and magic crystals imported into Brack Fortress until all the nobles are redeemed. The Duke's grandson also saw the previous scene and was frightened by the ground covered with corpses on the way back. Along the way, he did not raise any questions about his grandfather's decadent state. With the return of Duke Webster, the grand occasion of 300,000 corpses outside Brack Fortress and the strong declaration of the Night Elves, a force said to be ancient elves, quickly spread throughout the human world. Chapter 274 A Rich Harvest. After Duke Webster returned to his castle, he quickly contacted Severn Ninth. Relying on the means of magic communication, the Duke briefly and concisely told Severn Ninth everything he experienced during his trip to Brack Fortress. Although generally speaking, the great nobles in the country would not be of the same mind as the royal family, this time the country was in crisis. After seeing the strength and brutality of the Night Elves, he really had no intention of engaging in intrigues, so he sent Severn Ninth everything he saw and heard, and even some speculations. After reading Duke Webster's message carefully, Severn Ninth was speechless for a long time. He was also a monarch with great talent and strategy, otherwise he would not want to take advantage of the opportunity of foreign races attacking the small countries in the west to expand his territory. If the plan had not changed, it would not take many years for the Fourth Empire of Mankind to appear in Esles. However, even as a ruthless emperor, he was horrified when he thought of the Night Elves slaughtering 300,000 captives without any provocation. Those were not 300,000 trees or 300,000 grasses. They were 300,000 living humans. The Night Elves slaughtered 300,000 soldiers without any scruples, just because they were not satisfied with the ransom, and were too lazy to talk about it. This is really terrible. 7/9 may not know that in the eyes of the Night Elves, 300,000 humans may not be as good as 300,000 trees. At least, trees are friends of elves, and the elves of the Night Elves can also absorb wood element from trees, to form wood as consumables for the Night Elves. Humans are just enemies. The Night Elves are not like the human countries, that have various scruples. In human countries, unless one side is absolutely sure to destroy the other country, they will not do something that touches the bottom line when two countries are at war. Otherwise, if you capture our nobles this time, and don't want us to redeem them, then we will not release your nobles next time we capture them. This is not good for both sides. Moreover, the aristocracy will not allow this situation to happen. Similarly, if a country captures a large number of soldiers from another country, it will generally ask the enemy country to redeem them. What else can we do? Keeping them will waste food, and killing them will not guarantee that the enemy will not capture a large number of soldiers next time. Soldiers from human countries cannot be trained directly like the Night Elves. If everyone kills each other, won't their national strength decline and let others take advantage? Because of this kind of unspoken rule, except for particularly chaotic times, there are few large-scale massacres of soldiers on the Slays continent, at least in the human world. In the past few hundred years, the Night Elves slaughtered 300,000 troops of the Kingdom of Seven at one time, which is the first case. What kind of enemy are we facing? 7/9 sat in the royal study, feeling very entangled. Speaking of which, the Kingdom of Seven was also quite innocent. It assembled a large army to expand its territory, but was caught off guard by the aliens before it took action. It was really bad luck that they were preparing to invade other countries, but were invaded by the Night Elves. But there was nothing they could do, because the Kingdom of Seven was blocking the way for the Night Elves to enter the human world. In addition, the Kingdom of Seven was considered to be a relatively powerful kingdom among humans. Whether from the perspective of establishing prestige, or from the perspective of obtaining resources and territory, occupying the Kingdom of Seven was a good choice for the Night Elves. After thinking silently for a while, 7/9 still didn't understand how the Night Elves appeared and what their purpose was. So, he stopped thinking about it, and arranged other matters. First, he spread the news that the Night Elves killed 300,000 soldiers of the Kingdom of Seven. First, it might arouse the indignation of the people and other troops. Second, he could try to gain support from other countries through this news. Of course, 7/9 didn't have many illusions about the second one. Then, he notified his ministers and other nobles of the ransom required by the Night Elves. What 7/9 found strange was that the Night Elves did not bargain for the ransom, and only wanted magic cores and magic crystals as ransom. The prices of magic cores and magic crystals on the market were inflated for the nobles. With the materials hoarded by the nobles themselves, it was easy to pay the ransom demanded by the Night Elves, and there was even some money left over compared to paying gold coins directly. Therefore, after hearing the news, the nobles were very satisfied and prepared magic cores and magic crystals to go to Brack Fortress to redeem their family members. In the next 3 days, nobles from the Kingdom of Seven continued to come to Brack Fortress to use magic cores and magic crystals to redeem their family members and surviving private soldiers. The Night Elves also abided by the agreement and let the people take the people away, as long as they paid enough magic cores and magic crystals. This made many nobles who heard the news that the Night Elves massacred 300,000 troops feel relieved, thinking that these alien races who looked no different from the elves and were said to be ancient elves were not very fierce. However, the Flesh and Blood Avenue that extends from the Brack Fortress to the nearest city reminds these nobles that the Night Elves are not kind people. Although they seem to abide by some rules, they are still not easy to mess with. And this view is shared by all the countries that received intelligence within 3 days. At the same time, this is also the impression that the Night Elves want to give to the outside world. Powerful and fierce, but not without the possibility of peaceful coexistence. Although the Night Elves did not ask for a lot, the number of captured nobles this time was really large, so the Night Elves earned a lot of energy just from the ransom. Roughly calculated, the magic cores and magic crystals obtained from the ransom of the captured nobles can increase the existing troops of the Night Elves by half, after being converted into energy and consuming the corresponding wood. It shouldn't have been just this point, but the Night Elves are now fully equipped with enchanted equipment, so the energy consumed is particularly high. The reason why the Night Elves did not ask for a lot is that the resources of the Kingdom of Seven will soon be theirs, and the difference between getting it early and late is not very big. But Euphony is not concerned about this. As early as 2.5 days ago, Avril completed the ceremony of transforming into a hero through the lower soul crystal at the Elder's altar. And the newborn Avril, as Euphony had guessed, became Chapter 275, Dark Knight Sentinel Avril. Avril, Sentinel of the Night. Specific attributes omitted. No one wants to see those stars. Skills: Earthshot. Shoots a powerful arrow with the power of the earth, causing a stun effect to enemies in the center of the target area and a slow effect to surrounding areas. The size of the area and the duration of the negative effect increase with the skill level. Skyshot. Locks on the target unit and shoots an arrow that causes huge damage. The damage caused by the arrow increases sharply with the increase of the shooting distance. The power of the skill increases with the skill level. Tracking arrow. Shoots a special arrow at the target, allowing you to temporarily gain vision of the target, and during the effect duration, each of your attacks will cause damage to the target regardless of whether the target is the unit. The damage effect increases with the skill level. Natural transfer. When a friendly unit performs abnormal life recovery effects within the range of natural transfer, all friendly units within the range of natural transfer will gain 1% of the life recovery speed of the unit. The range of natural transfer increases with the skill level. Sentinel's Eye. Actively used to gain vision of all units within the skill range, including enemies in stealth. The range and duration of the skill increase with the skill level. That's right, Avril has become a hero designed based on the Hippogriff Knight in Dota, the Night Sentinel. However, compared to the Night Sentinel in the game, Avril has changed a lot. The repatriation skill and the ultimate skill Phantom Reconnaissance have disappeared, which Euphony is quite relieved about. Because in SRAS, these two skills can be said to have no place to use. The effect of the tracking arrow has not changed much, and combined with the sky shot, it has become an excellent skill for sniping strongmen. The earth shot is transformed from the shock shot skill that Avril had before, from the original single control skill to a powerful group control skill. The greatly changed natural transmission and the new ultimate skill of the Sentinel Eye made Euphony a little confused. Natural transmission is easy to say, Euphony can probably guess some uses. For example, those bloodworms should be able to provide great protection to the Night Elves through the skill of natural transmission. Before, because the number of effects of the Legion skill Soul Link was limited, the bloodworms could only guarantee the powerful life recovery speed of the front row. After the natural transmission, as long as the Claw Druids cast Rejuvenation on a bloodworm, all friendly units within the natural transmission range will receive 1% of the bloodworm's life recovery. A bloodworm can only provide 1%, which seems a bit too little, but there are 100 bloodworms. In other words, if 100 Claw Druids cast Rejuvenation on 100 bloodworms, then every friendly unit within the natural transmission range will receive a life recovery effect of Rejuvenation. What a perverted effect. Before, Euphony also felt that the Night Elves had a shortcoming, that is, there were too few units with recovery ability. Although the Claw Druids can use Rejuvenation, it is obviously a drop in the bucket compared to the huge number of Night Elves now, and the Claw Druids don't have much mana. Now with the natural transmission skill of the Night Sentinel Avril, the Night Elves don't have to worry about casualties at all. Coupled with the magic bottle in the inventory, opened by the elite soldiers, Euphony can proudly declare that, as long as the Night Elves are not killed instantly, they can recover at a very fast speed. In a sense, this can be called immortality. As for the Sentinel Eye skill, Euphony has never seen it before. It seems that this skill is a bit similar to the effect of Euphony's God's Perspective, but since it is similar to the effect of God's Perspective, it is better for Euphony to give the heroes God's Perspective. This skill seems to have an additional effect of detecting invisibility. With this effect, it will become the ultimate move of the Night Sentinel. Euphony was a little puzzled, but he soon put it behind his mind. Avril, who was transformed into a Night Sentinel with a lower level soul crystal, now has a level cap of level 4 and cannot learn the Sentinel Eye skill at all. The transformed Avril has 2 skill points. Yufei chose to add them to sky shooting and natural transmission. This does not mean that Avril only has these 2 skills now. After all, unlike the heroes summoned directly from the Elder Altar, Avril is transformed with soul crystals. Before the derived hero skills are not selected, Avril's original skills can still be used. In other words, the shock shot derived from the earth shooting skill can still be used when the earth shooting is not selected by Avril. After having enough understanding, Yufei officially announced that Avril became the 4th hero of the Night Elves and sent her to the front line again. Avril's natural transmission skill is really suitable for the battlefield. Although an elf is needed to stabilize the rear, Avril's skills determine that she can play the greatest role on the battlefield. Avril's successful transformation gave Yufei enough confidence in the method of transforming heroes with soul crystals. He decided to let the Night Elves' future combat center lean towards the strong. In order to reduce losses, the Night Elves used to kill ordinary soldiers on a large scale in battle, and the strong usually fled. This is because the Night Elves only valued energy before. After occupying places like magic crystal veins, they naturally did not want to lose the Night Elves to those strong people. However, in the future, I'm afraid that even epic level warriors will not be able to escape from the Night Elves. Looking at the eyes of Luna and the other military leaders, Yufei could not help but mourn for the strong ones among the future enemies. Avril, who was originally of the same status as himself, has now become the 4th hero of the Night Elves, which has greatly stimulated Luna and other military leaders. Dividing line. At this time, 5 days have passed since Avril was transformed into a heroic Night Sentinel. During these 5 days, the noble children and their private armies captured by the Night Elves in the Black Fortress have all been redeemed by their respective families. While the last batch of noble children were redeemed, Yufei had already discovered the new actions of the Kingdom of Seven through the patrolling Horned Eagle Knights in the air. Previously, considering that the Night Elves still had many nobles of their own country, although the new troops of the Kingdom of Seven had been gathered together in a very short time, they did not launch an attack on the Black Fortress. Now that all the captured nobles have been redeemed, the Kingdom of Seven has no scruples. Although the Kingdom of Seven was still negotiating with the Night Elves 5 days ago, the army of the Kingdom of Seven had already arrived 5 days later. Yufei was not surprised at all. Humans are like this. They may greet you with a smile 1 second, but they can draw their swords and stab you the next second. The troops assembled by 7/9 at this time have exhausted the national strength of the Kingdom of Seven. In addition to leaving 300,000 necessary border guards facing other human countries, all the armies of the Kingdom of Seven have gathered together to form an army of nearly 1.5 million, pressing towards the Black Fortress. Among them, some powerful retainers supported by the great nobles and ministers of the kingdom are also included. Although they can usually disagree with the king or even disobey the king's orders, at such a critical moment, no noble is a fool, and they all contribute their own strength. There is no way. If they fight with other human countries, it will be fine. At least the kings and even emperors of human countries will not provoke the nerves of the aristocracy. If some nobles choose to surrender, or even collaborate with the enemy, they can still save their lives. However, this time they were facing a group of alien races that looked like elves, but were not as cowardly as those elves. Just by looking at the 300,000 human corpses outside the Black Fortress, the people of the Seven Kingdom could imagine what would happen if they were defeated by this race called the Night Elves. In fact, even if the Night Elves conquered the Seven Kingdom, they would definitely not do anything to the nobles. The Night Elves only needed energy. As long as the nobles were willing to serve the Night Elves would definitely guarantee their corresponding status. But Yufei also knew that in the current situation, let alone making the nobles of the Seven Kingdom believe this, it would be extremely difficult to even communicate with them. So Yufei gave up the idea of recruiting the original nobles of the Seven Kingdom. At most, all these enemies could be destroyed in the battle, and then, like in the small countries in the west, puppets could be established to serve the Night Elves and plunder energy. When the Seven Kingdom gathered almost all its national forces to clash with the Night Elves, no neighboring country took advantage of the fire to attack the Seven Kingdom. This is certainly not their mercy, but they are not sure what will happen next. If the Kingdom of Seven wins, they will certainly drive away the countries that dare to invade with the power of victory. And if the Night Elves win, how can the surrounding countries dare to touch the alien race that even the Kingdom of Seven cannot stop? What these countries hope most is that the Kingdom of Seven and the Night Elves will both suffer losses or fall into a stalemate and protracted war. In this way, they can fish in troubled waters. Of course, they don't know that the Night Elves will never give them the opportunity to fish in troubled waters. Because in Eupheni's eyes at this time, the Kingdom of Seven has become his territory. Eupheni feels extremely gratified for the fact that 7/9 has assembled a large army with the whole country's strength to come to the decisive battle. In this way, the Night Elves can win in one battle, instead of conquering cities one by one like in those small countries in the west before, which can save a lot of effort. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.